Greetings, my dear friend. Cheaters, they are ready to come up with the most ingenious plans in order to achieve their goals. They don't care about the feelings of their loved ones, but their deception cannot last forever. Sooner or later, all their secret affairs are revealed. In this story, the main character accidentally finds out that his wife has been cheating on him for a long time. But the more he learns about adultery, the more it amazes him. Let's listen to this story and find out how the main character will cope with all the obstacles on his way to a happy life. And while you're watching this video, put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Let's go. Before leaving for a business trip, I took a last walk around the house to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. After collecting everything I needed, I informed my wife that I would leave the official car at the airport. But I realized that the car, along with other things of the company, is still in the office. At the age of 45, I decided to retire early, having devoted 25 years to working in a managerial position. I decided to receive 3/4 of the full pension benefit, and by strategically investing my stock options in the company's retirement account each year, I was able to minimize taxes and secure a substantial retirement income. Thanks to successful investments in technology, I now earn more than my current salary. I recently opened a new account with Bank of America, where my retirement checks are transferred. Last week, I received my last salary, including vacation pay, as well as an impressive check for $850,000 from sold stocks, which is a profitable nest egg. The company managed to find a replacement for me at a lower price, so that the check for shares would not be attributed to the assets of the spouses. I waited until today to deposit it. I decided to give my expensive suits to Goodwill, keeping only one for myself. I packed up my things and moved to a new place where taxes and the cost of living were lower than in California. I rented a U-Haul truck through a family trust in Uncle John's name, loaded the essentials into it, and paid in cash to remain anonymous. Leaving behind the job I despised and the restless actions of my wife, I went to my quaint hometown to start life with a clean slate. I was hoping for a more peaceful life, where there would be more space between me and the neighbors. My wife forgot that I still own my parents' farm, a place she always despised. Her contempt for the farm confirmed my decision to leave. I started to see her as a snob who hadn't changed, which made me doubt that I really knew her. Her behavior made me realize the true nature of our relationship, which prompted me to make plans for a future filled with unexpected satisfaction. My departure from the past had far-reaching consequences, as I did not include the farm in our marital property, leaving it in my parents' trust. Leasing land to nearby farmers allowed me to create a solid reserve fund. Instead of overseeing the design and construction of tractors and heavy machinery, I used my skills to repair them. One of the family members renovated my parents' old homestead, giving me a temporary place to stay. This confidence allowed me to feel calm. I called my wife Kendra to inform her about the upcoming business trip, which coincided with her return from her own trip. I confirmed the details of her flight, and she expressed impatience that she would finally return home after 2 weeks of living on suitcases. Every detail of my trip was carefully planned. 2 hours before her arrival, my 3 daughters and their husbands were busy preparing a surprise birthday party that we had planned together. One of my daughters went to the trick and even invited my mother's boss and his wife. When I hinted at this, his wife gladly agreed, because the boss always appreciated Kendra's work. His wife was glad to finally meet the woman he spoke so highly of. My daughters didn't know that the surprise turned out to be much bigger than they expected. More than 50 family members and friends gathered for dinner to celebrate her belated birthday. We postponed the celebration because my wife was going to go out of town with her management team on her birthday. She claimed it was something very important that she couldn't miss. I doubted it, but I didn't say anything. I informed my daughters that I had recorded my congratulations for my wife on a CD. Despite the fact that I had to go, I wanted to attend the celebration with all my heart. I asked them to turn on the recording at the end of the party so that everyone could hear my thoughts about my mom. All they had to do was turn on the big TV on the terrace and press the play button. I left the timing in their hands. I decided it was time to contact my eldest daughter's husband and tell him my new contact details. After working together for several years, David became one of the rising stars in my previous job and eventually met my daughter through me. As an accountant, he knew about my retirement plans. Initially skeptical, he believed that my decision to retire was due to my wife's infidelity, only after I showed him the investigator's report. David was the kind of guy who needed concrete evidence before he believed in anything. I felt regret tonight, mainly because David was about to learn the harsh reality in a not very pleasant way, but the truth had to be revealed. He advised me to delete all contact information from the internet, including deactivating my Facebook account, which I did as soon as Kendra boarded her flight home. David insisted on leaving my wife alone with the unknown. Despite the fact that she was his mother-in-law, David believed that she deserved it by her actions. I agreed because in our situation she would have got half anyway. Before I left our house for the last time, I sent copies of bank balances and a list of our minor debts to my lawyer. The last real estate tax assessment estimated our house at about $900,000. I could buy a new house with my share, and I still had money for furniture. When I left, I casually threw my mobile phone into the trash can under the kitchen sink. I was sure that nothing would turn up until the end of the party. It was with a heavy heart that I said goodbye to Lodi, California, 25 years later. When I returned to the wastelands of South Dakota, I felt like a nobody again, just like when I first left. Only a few people outside my family could have noticed my absence, but the thought of how my upcoming video would affect countless lives made me smile. I stopped by a cell phone store, bought a new phone, and got a local number for the area I now called home. Back in my truck, I dialed the number. A woman answered, and I gave her my new contact details, after which I quickly ended the conversation to save the battery in case of unforeseen circumstances. When I set off, I was looking forward to a trip to the east in mid-March, when the temperature had not yet risen. As spring brought new life to the countryside, Kendra and I remembered the day we first met at an Aerosmith concert many years ago. She, a radiant native of California, and I, a newcomer from another state, quickly fell in love with each other and tied the knot on the anniversary of our meeting. My parents even flew in to witness our union. Despite a busy career, I was involved in research and development, and Kendra in import and marketing. We have remained loyal to our companies for many years. To this day, Kendra charms everyone present with her ageless beauty and impeccable style, showing off the same figure and grace that caught my attention when we first said yes to each other. I couldn't say the same about myself. I had a classic dad's body with a tummy. Kendra was glad to be back home after spending 2 weeks with her boss and lover, Eric Hopper. She was annoyed that her husband, Colin, had to leave unexpectedly, but this was a common occurrence due to their hectic schedule. Although staying with Eric was a refreshing change, she was looking forward to getting back to her usual routine. Although making love gave her pleasure every night for 2 weeks and made her feel young and valuable, in the end she preferred an intimate relationship with her husband twice a week on a regular basis. Boarding a private plane, she quickly got her bearings at the airport and got into an official car to drive home. When Kendra arrived home, the whole family was waiting for her, all 3 daughters, along with their husbands. The eldest daughter was 23 years old, and the twins were 22. The lively celebration lasted for several hours. Kendra enjoyed the attention of family, friends, and even colleagues. To her surprise, the boss and his wife also showed up, despite the fact that Kendra had spent 2 weeks with him. When Kendra asked who invited the boss and his wife, the eldest daughter admitted that it was her. She explained that the boss often bragged about her, and his wife really wanted to meet her. This revelation flattered Kendra and encouraged her. When the clock struck 8 in the evening, The three daughters gathered to celebrate their mother's latest achievement. "Mom," the twins picked up, "Dad didn't want to miss the moment and prepared a special message for you." They turned on an 80-inch TV and put on a DVD. The chatter at the party stopped when everyone heard my voice wishing Kendra a happy birthday. Talking about the past year, I touched on several memorable moments. I started on a light note by mentioning a few humorous anecdotes, such as the arrival of our first grandchild, the wedding of our last unmarried daughter, the recent anniversary celebration, and our upcoming plans for a second honeymoon. I noted that this year has been hectic for us. I expressed confidence that my partner and I are finally on the same wavelength and moving in the same direction. I was looking forward to the prospect of reuniting with a romantic weekend reminiscent of the days before we were parents. But when I returned home from a trip abroad, I was shocked to find that something had worked in our security system. This unexpected event completely turned my world upside down. I discovered that my wife and I exist in different worlds. A video clip began in which my wife and daughters talked about their secret lovers hiding from their husbands. The room fell silent as their confessions were made, in which they talked in detail about their relationships, meetings, and what they did to keep their affairs secret. It was unpleasant to watch women talk so openly about their infidelities. I had to watch the video several times to come to terms with this unexpected truth. I was intrigued by how confident they were in their ability to deceive their partners. Kendra boasted that she had had 3 lovers in the last 10 years, each of whom gave her new thrills until she got tired of them. She confidently stated that she was already in search of a 4th lover. It was obvious that their husbands did not notice the true opinion of these women about them. It was not difficult for them to keep their partners in the dark. It was enough to make them believe that they were the center of their universe. The information they revealed was a revelation to some of the spouses who attended the party. For many, this night was unforgettable. Watching what was happening from the screen, I couldn't help but wonder if they knew that our security system was recording them. If so, it was like a cruel prank. If not, then their frank words betrayed their true attitude towards their partners. Although I could not fully trust what I heard, it certainly sowed doubts in my head. In the next video, everyone witnessed the discoveries that became possible thanks to the investigators I hired. The second video shows my wife and her employer during a recent business trip. Filmed in the first week of their 2-week trip, it captured every detail. From a long time spent naked on Vancouver's only nudist beach to their shared room at the Western Bayshore Hotel. The footage captures their registration as Mr. and Mrs. at the hotel, as well as an intimate horse and carriage ride through Stanley Park with an exchange of affectionate words. Romantic dinner scenes were also included in the film to paint a clear picture of their romantic relationship. A romantic evening boat trip along the bay, and an exciting day of whale watching. To the uninformed eye, it looked like a honeymoon. But when the video came to an end, it became clear that I had been deceived many times. The last words captured on film spoke volumes. "This extravagant holiday was a birthday present for you, my dear Kendra. Celebrating 43 years with his new love must have been an exciting event. Although I cannot unequivocally prove that you had a romantic relationship with your boss Eric Hopper during the trip, I also cannot deny this possibility," I said in the video. "I'm sure there was only one double bed in your room. I have to ask my 3 sons-in-law a question. Do you really know what your wives do when you're not around? I don't seem to know. Are you sure that your children are biologically yours? Am I really the father of my children?" I pondered further, wondering how many of Kendra's supposed business trips were actually just an opportunity to spend time with her latest lover. Have I really been such an inadequate partner and husband all these years? She seemed to think so, given the length of her affairs. "It's hard to trust anyone in this new reality," I said. I noticed how little importance I attached to my eyes. "If you were really unhappy, why didn't you just ask for a divorce? One last question, Kendra. Is your high position with Mr. Hopper related to the fact that you are ready to enter into an intimate relationship with him? I have to ask in light of the latest revelations, what exactly is he rewarding you for? Is there an additional payment for non-traditional activities? What is the rate for a married woman acting as his personal escort? I would like to witness this exchange of views. I'm interested to hear Eric Hopper's answers to these questions. If his wife is present at this, I think she will also be interested. I asked the questions from the video. When the screen dimmed, I finished my performance, and there was a heavy silence in the courtyard. No one knew how to react or what to say next. My words caused a whirlwind of questions and cast a shadow on the reputation of several people. Even in the calm atmosphere of California, everyone felt uncomfortable about being involved in this situation. Here, the police didn't worry about thefts worth less than $1,000, a small fee for the privilege of living in this state. When people left that evening, many had tense conversations with their partners, experiencing the consequences of my revelation. But one thing was for sure. Everything would never be the same again. It was a holiday that will forever remain in everyone's memory. Later, I found out that my wife Kendra and our 3 daughters were in tears. I couldn't help but wonder if it was guilt for their actions or just because they were caught. At that moment, I doubted that any of them really cared about me. The highlight of the evening was the moment when Eric Hopper's stunning 37-year-old wife, Karen Hopper, took out 2 legal envelopes and handed them to me. I was told that Karen took great pleasure in slapping my almost ex-wife and hurling insults at her. Kendra and her lover were in the process of divorcing their spouses, and now they had to deal with the consequences of their affair becoming public. I wonder what was going on in their heads when they were faced with this new reality. Eric was stunned when he was caught and exposed in front of his wife. He knew that nothing could be fixed. The evidence I presented was clear and irrefutable. He believed that his wife did not notice his actions because she never asked him questions. But he soon realized that she was actually my lawyer. Kendra's act led to such a mess. If he had any hope of saving his marriage, he had to let her go. Revealing the truth about my wife and our world led to the collapse of 5 marriages. My sons-in-law told their wives to stay away until they were ready to confess. Despite the change in the attitude of the younger generation towards morality and values, some boundaries still could not be crossed. But being in California, it was possible to act differently. It's a pity that it took a similar situation for them to understand this. I kept driving forward until I was tired. I checked into a motel and parked my truck in full view of the office. Grabbing one of the suitcases and my new mobile phone, I headed to my room. After taking a shower and getting ready for bed, I decided to charge my phone. Out of curiosity, I turned it on to check if there were any messages from the woman who had my number. To my surprise, I received a message that read, "Back from the party, call me, Karen." Without hesitation, I dialed my divorce lawyer's number, and she answered before the 3rd call. "Hi, honey," I greeted her. "How was your day?" I asked. "Better than we expected," she replied. "Eric and I arrived at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There were already about 60 people there, and they were all in high spirits. The party went on flawlessly for 5 hours. You were right, they didn't even know," Karen said. Kendra was overjoyed, feeling like the center of attention. Just as the evening was coming to an end, your daughter surprised everyone by showing a recorded video. "Thanks to what you shared, I have 3 new clients for the firm," Karen exclaimed, taking a pause to calm down. "And as soon as the video with your wife and daughters started, it dawned on them that they forgot to turn off the surveillance cameras that day." It was funny to hear all 4 women exclaim at the same time, "Oh no, we're in trouble," Karen said with a laugh. She couldn't help but giggle. Everyone present was amazed at how frivolously they discussed their misdeeds. The video of our partner's romantic seclusion confirmed this. The authenticity of the original conversation was undeniable. When I handed our other halves the divorce papers, a panic began. It was like a fire alarm went off in their houses. 3 sons-in-law even asked if I was a divorce lawyer, says Karen. I agreed to serve them because I said yes. I immediately received 3 advance payment checks. It seems that your daughter's marriages may also end in divorce, Karen noted. Have they tried to contact me? I asked. After most of the guests left, your wife tried to contact you, Karen replied. We watched as she found your phone in the trash, which was ringing. By getting rid of the phone, you've delivered a powerful message without saying a word. It was like you gave a signal to your family that you were done with them, Karen clarified. My husband has not commented on this situation in any way, Karen said. Anyway, he was so careful, unlike my wife, I said with a smile. Time is running out. 6 months after the filing of the documents, our divorces will be finalized. I don't regret that I stumbled upon that conversation with the guards. He brought me to you. Perhaps they will come to an agreement without any disputes, I added. Do you still want to sell everything and turn it into cash? Karen asked. Yes, unless she decides to buy out my share. Given the outflow of people from California, it might work in my favor if that's what she prefers, I replied. I can't wait to see the look on her face when she finds out that you quit your old job, Karen exclaimed. I'm putting my law practice up for sale tomorrow. I've already told my sister and her husband that you're coming. My sister's husband is very happy to finally meet you. He still believes that it was you who helped him with the tractor workshop a few years ago, Karen added. As the consequences of their actions began to sink in, I couldn't help but wonder if we'd still be laughing when all was said and done. Kendra froze, clutching her husband's mobile phone in her hand. She wanted to tell him that Eric Hopper had no meaning in her life and that their 3 daughters belonged only to him. But as she stood there, she suddenly realized that the truth no longer mattered to him. It was his way of telling the world that he was done with them. She blamed herself for the lies she told, for her selfishness, without thinking about the consequences of her actions. The temporary courage from illicit affairs and secret trysts was now overshadowed by the devastating cost it brought to her family. There was no turning back now. In the small town of Lodi, where gossip spread like wildfire, Kendra knew that forgiveness was possible, but oblivion was not. Whispers and judgmental glances followed her everywhere, constantly reminding her of the mistakes she had made. She has learned from her own experience that the fleeting pleasures of deception are not worth the scars they leave behind. Colin's actions spoke volumes. He decided to cut everyone out of his life until he got over his anger. Although he had always forgiven her for past mistakes, it would be a long time before he could do it again. Kendra began to cling to the hope that she would eventually be able to get him back. Reflecting on her lifestyle, Kendra realized that it had been shaped over time. She had a progressive mindset, and she often shifted the blame onto others instead of taking responsibility for her actions. She didn't see any guilt in her behavior. No one was injured, and she continued her extramarital affairs without consequences. After the successful completion of the first affair, she discovered that she had a third lover, Eric Hopper. She had no idea that she would be caught, because she and her husband Colin were absorbed in their careers and each other. But her own stupidity led to her betrayal being revealed. Now not only her marriage is under threat, but also the divorce of her daughters. Karen and I grew up in close proximity to each other, but the age difference has not allowed us to cross paths until now. By the time she started working, I had already graduated from high school. When I decided to explore divorce options, I made an appointment with her firm. By a happy coincidence, she was the one who was entrusted with my case. After hiring her, I showed her a video clip that shocked her. The man my wife mentioned in the video turned out to be her husband. We confirmed this through her personal Facebook page, and that day we both realized that our marriages were over. We were united by the betrayal of our spouses, and after a long discussion of ethical standards, we decided to work together. As we got deeper into the investigation, our relationship grew stronger. At first, we were professionals, but over time we found solace in each other's company, and our friendship blossomed. The feelings of betrayal, anger, resentment, and hatred that we shared were incomprehensible to those who did not follow in our footsteps. Over the course of countless phone conversations, we overcame these emotions together, laying the foundation for a strong connection. Our relationship was built on mutual support and understanding, and we leaned on each other in difficult times. An in-depth study of our past has brought us even closer together, and we have discovered that we are kindred spirits with similar life experiences. Recalling common memories and jokes of our youth, we laughed and had fun, which further strengthened our bond. None of us expected to meet love, but she found us on her own. It was only last week, after a long day of talking to her daughters, that we finally confessed our feelings to each other. Despite the deep bond, we agreed to keep our relationship strictly platonic until both our divorces were finalized in order to avoid any complications. Just 12 days ago, when I was saying goodbye to Kendra, Karen called me in upset feelings. She had just told her daughters the news about their father, but they refused to believe her. I quickly asked if her eldest daughter was still with her, and when she confirmed, I asked to talk to her in person. I informed Karen's daughters that their mother was my lawyer and that I had evidence to share with them. I explained that I didn't know Karen before I hired her to handle my divorce case. It was only when she saw the evidence that we discovered that we had common problems. I recommended that they review the evidence before making any judgments. Soon, Karen's daughters came to my house. I demonstrated the operation of the security system at home, explaining that the external cameras can be turned off before entering, but the internal ones remain active if they are not turned off. They carefully recorded every sound and movement. I thought it was important for them to understand the situation before watching the video, so I asked Amber and Meadow to observe the conversation between my wife and our daughters. Shock was reflected on their faces when they found out that their father had entered into an intimate relationship with my wife. That's what your mother witnessed after I hired her. I couldn't reveal the source of her information because of her ethical obligations. Your father and my wife are currently in Vancouver as part of a planned business trip. The investigators are gathering additional evidence, I said. When Kendra returns, she will be handed the divorce papers, I added. After that, I had a deep conversation with Karen's daughters about the importance of vows, emphasizing that forgiveness is easy, but restoring trust is a real test. I expressed concern that the daughters might learn from their mother's stubborn behavior, which, according to Kendra herself, has been going on for many years. It made us reconsider the sincerity of our marriage vows and look at our relationship from a new angle. I was saying that these actions ruined our lives. Without our children, our world would be like a facade. Meadow, Karen's youngest child, impressed me with her wisdom. She noted that if our partners really appreciated us, they would never have harmed us. After our conversation, I called Karen to tell her about our conversation. She later confessed to me that her daughter was glad to open up to her. Amber, Karen's daughter, noted that I resemble her grandfather in my ability to simplify complex issues, and she attributes this skill to our similar rural upbringing. Karen and I appreciated the simplicity of the life we once had, and now we strive to return to it. We are tired of the hustle and bustle and fierce competition of our current lifestyle. The next morning, I hit the road to return to the life I once knew. Driving along the Eastern Highway, I set a goal to reach northern Utah near the Wyoming border by evening, leaving Nevada behind. I took my time, enjoying the sights and experiences that I always wanted to see. To my surprise, I felt a sense of peace and satisfaction that I had been missing. That evening, as I settled into a cozy hotel, I reflected on the upcoming trip with a newfound sense of inspiration and determination. I logged into my new mailbox and noticed a message from my older brother-in-law asking me to call him. Fortunately, he provided his phone number. "Hi, David," I greeted him when he answered. "Hi, Dad. I'm glad you called," he replied. He had something to share, but first he asked where I was. "I'm on the road licking my wounds," I joked. "I will definitely give this to the person who asked about you," David chuckled. It was a crazy day. Kendra showed up at the office this morning and demanded to know where you were sent, David said. Kendra decided to fly away to try to establish a relationship with you. She did not lose hope that the relationship could still be saved. After learning about your resignation, she asked for confirmation, and I was asked to talk to her. I explained that you retired early and are now in the process of moving. When she asked where exactly, I admitted that I didn't know. She accused me of lying, insisting that I knew where the pension checks were going or could easily find out. Then the situation quickly escalated. I had to call security to get her out, David said. I couldn't help but laugh, despite the seriousness of the situation. There is some good news, Dad. Carrie called and said that her mom was fired just after Eric Hopper received your $5 million alienation lawsuit from a Vancouver lawyer. She had to take a taxi home. Kendra went to an employment lawyer and handed him another case. It was transmitted around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Carrie really wants to come home and see our son. I told her that we wouldn't make any decisions until I confirmed paternity. If she has any problems with this, she can go to court, David said. David mentioned that Carrie claimed she hadn't had an intimate relationship with anyone since they got married. But I reminded him that her own words in the recorded conversation contradict this statement. Despite that, I joked that at least no one was bothering me about it. I expressed my pleasure at the impromptu vacation I got into, finally seeing some of the sights I've always wanted to see. While Carrie and I were discussing the possibility of a divorce, David informed me that the twins had already moved in with Kendra. My wife is also staying at the same place. No one wants to have anything to do with them. Right now, everyone is too upset to think straight. Whether we get divorced or not will depend on the results of the DNA test. If he's not my son, then there's no point in us staying together. It looks like I was tricked into telling a made-up story. She only showed me what she wanted me to see, like bait on a hook, David said. I had 6 months to deal with my emotions. Believe me, it takes time to understand what you can tolerate, I told my son-in-law. That's why I advised you to take your time and not make hasty decisions. Over time, I found the strength to let go of the past and start all over again. Now my life is following a different path that fills me with joy, I said. So you're not planning on coming back? David asked. Only if it is necessary to resolve legal issues, I replied. There are fewer expenses and taxes in the new place where I am moving, which will allow me to improve my financial situation. In addition, the CEO expressed interest in me acting as an advisor on occasion. Thanks to reliable communication and my reliable computer, I will be able to fulfill this role without leaving home and without interrupting my professional activities, I said. I promised him that I would do it, but only if I didn't have to wear formal attire, I added, laughing. They miss you here already, Dad, David remarked. I heard that people came to you with their ideas, and you gave them advice on what worked and what didn't, I said. Is this your new mobile phone number? David asked. Yes, it is, but let's keep this between us for now, I replied. Oh, and one more thing. Next time you talk to Kendra, tell her she can go back to one of her friends with privileges. They accepted her earlier, so she can come back to them if she wants to. If she argues, just tell her about it, I added. Unaware of this, David secretly recorded our conversation and shared it with my wife and daughters. Later, it turned out that Kendra was not impressed, considering that I had no right to give her advice to my son-in-law. My daughters began to realize the consequences of imitating their mother's choices as their husbands moved away from them. They began to doubt their devotion to their mother. The next call was made to Karen, who was very happy to hear from me. Karen and her team were overwhelmed with 5 more divorce cases after my wife's unexpected birthday celebration. It turned out that several of Kendra's past relationships had become known. She knew about Kendra's dismissal and claimed it was Eric's way of making amends, but she wasn't interested. He did not know that the board of directors had already informed her about the situation and assured her that Kendra would be reinstated and promoted, and he would be demoted for misuse of the company's resources for personal purposes. Kendra's competence in her role was undeniable. Karen informed her daughter that she plans to return to South Dakota after the divorce. She explained that if Meadow and her sister wanted to stay in California, they would either have to find their own place or live with their father. Karen expressed a desire to live easier at this stage of her life. When Meadow asked if it had anything to do with her feelings for me, Karen admitted that she had fallen in love with me, but we hadn't done anything yet. Meadow remarked that she hoped the new relationship would help her mother feel young again, to which Karen replied that it was true. Karen invited her children to join her in her move, stressing that they are already old enough to choose the life they want. She wanted them to learn from her experiences and the difficulties she faced. I knew Kendra would have a hard time finding someone like me because of the public breakup that ruined her chances of finding true love. I was wondering how long it would take Kendra to realize this. Arriving in my hometown after a 3-day trip, I stopped at a trendy diner to have lunch and then head to the farm. I had already arranged for the electricity to be connected and was looking forward to my burger and fries while drinking coffee. Suddenly, an old acquaintance turned to me, who entered the diner and took a seat at my booth. "Son of a witch, is that you, Colin Wade?" "Glad to see you, son. You look good," he added with a smile. "Thank you, Uncle John. Where's your wife?" I replied, returning the smile. "She and our daughters are in the house now, preparing it. I had to fix a few minor plumbing problems. The house is almost ready to move in. They put things in order and fixed the refrigerator to make it work," he explained. "Replace the outdated fuses on the old stove with newer ones so that it looks more modern and functional," I asked. Robert and his wife moved to the city and took over the farm, so it was great to chat with them over dinner, which I treated them to. It was wonderful to be reunited with my family again. Before heading to my childhood home, I stopped by the local grocery store to stock up on the essentials. I was pleasantly surprised to find that food prices are much more affordable her place. The outdated fuses on the love with newer ones, so that it looks more modern functional, I asked. Robert and his wife moved to the city and took over the farm, so it was great to chat with them over dinner, which I treated them to. It was wonderful to be reunited with my family again. Before heading to my childhood home, I stopped by the local grocery store to stock up on the essentials. I was pleasantly surprised to find that food prices are much more affordable here. As a result, I filled 2 carts with goods and headed to the cash register, where I met the cashier, who turned out to be my former classmate. When I arrived at the family home, I was pleasantly surprised by its appearance. I was greeted by my aunt and cousins who helped me unload the groceries. After putting everything in its place, we had a cup of coffee together. When they left, I looked at the house carefully and realized that, as Uncle John had warned, serious repairs were needed. I quickly contacted him to get recommendations about reliable construct arrived at the family home. I was pleasantly surprised by its appearance. I was greeted by my aunt and cousins who helped me unload the groceries. After putting everything in its place, we had a cup of coffee together. When they left, I looked at the hoe. The barn was in excellent condition, a fresh roof, new boards, and a fresh coat of paint. It looked almost like new. I planned to convert it into a workshop for repairing tractors and heavy machinery by removing the stalls. In the evening, I called Karen to share my idea with her. We agreed to build a 1-story house with a small basement for storage, on a 4-foot foundation, and with double insulation for harsh winter weather. I assured her that I would visit her brother-in-law's dealership the next day, and then contacted the contractor to discuss my plans. After work, he said that he had some plans that needed to be brought. I returned the rented truck and went to the nearest car dealership. There, I bought a nice, slightly used Ford truck with low mileage, registered it for myself, and insured it. Before returning the rented car, I stopped by the bank to make a deposit, pick up some blank checks, and order something else. Gasoline prices in this area surprised me. They turned out to be much cheaper than those I was used to. I took the opportunity to introduce myself to Karen's older brother, who, as I found out, was my school classmate. Impressed, he immediately offered me a job. Feeling prepared, I began to talk about my plans and current cooperation with the corporation. He jokingly talked about his sister and our relationship, mentioning that he had never been able to understand her first husband. I agreed with his opinion. The contractor and I have come to an agreement on the cost of building a 4-bedroom house with a spacious 2-car garage located behind the existing house. We decided to install a new septic system and use gas for heating, water supply, and cooking, as well as a large gas generator for emergency power. The house project assumes an open layout. My new house has a laundry room with access to the garage and an underground room with double insulation. And all this is provided for by my divorce agreement. After signing the contract to buy the house and meeting with Karen's brother, David, I got a call saying that Kendra had hired a private firm to track me down in hopes of reconciliation. I explained to David that there was nothing to put up with, and that resuming a relationship with Kendra would only lead to a repeat of her past actions. After reflecting on my words, David realized that even the smartest people sometimes do not notice simple truths. This is the reason for the numerous problems in our government. I have already mentioned that Kendra does not consider her actions problematic and believes that I should change my way of thinking to adapt to her behavior. She does not repent of her actions, only that she was exposed, I said. David agreed with my point of view and realized how important it was to discuss marriage equality with Carrie. He remembered his father's saying, "What's good for a goose is good for a goose," and realized that his mother viewed him as a tool to achieve her own goals. I advised David to insist on marriage counseling, in particular with a conservative psychologist, in order to introduce Carrie to a different point of view. David admitted that without finding a compromise, their relationship would not stand up, and he might have to put his own well-being first and leave. Meanwhile, I tended the barn and dismantled the stalls, finding solace in physical labor and rediscovering the joy of using my muscles. Suddenly, on Thursday evening, Karen called me. Karen informed me that my daughters had contacted my brother to inform him of our divorces, not realizing that he had already known about it for more than 4 months. Meadow went on to talk about how I discovered their father's infidelity and mentioned our first meeting. Then Joseph told me that he went to school with you and described in detail how many years ago you helped him buy a dealership. In the end, it turned out in the conversation that you had returned to take care of your family's farm. They discussed us for a long time, gradually revealing all the details. They were shocked to learn that their beloved uncle sincerely supports our relationship, says Karen. Kendra hired a firm to track me down. She thinks that if she can talk to me, she can convince me to forgive her and come back, I confessed. How did you find out about this? Karen asked. I contacted my son-in-law who works in the office. He keeps me up to date, and our conversations help him navigate further actions, I explained. That's understandable, Karen replied. It's better not to share any information with my daughters after what they've done, Karen sighed. Intrigued, I asked further, what did they do? They used my credit card to book a plane ticket, Karen said. Karen arrived at the regional airport at 8 o'clock on Friday evening, looking forward to meeting me. While waiting for her arrival, I held a bouquet of 12 red roses in my hands, feeling the same excitement and hope. This weekend marked our first official time together, and it took me back to a time when I felt like a young and carefree teenager. As she approached, her brown hair, arranged in a hairstyle, emphasized her natural beauty. A smile instinctively spread across my face. I was glad to see her in casual clothes. Blue jeans, a sunny yellow blouse, and a cozy denim jacket radiating comfort and authenticity. Knowing that she hadn't eaten yet, we took her suitcase and went to Ruby Tuesdays, where a surprise awaited me. After parking and making sure that her things were safe, we entered the restaurant. To my delight, her brother and sister-in-law were already sitting at the table, and by the end of the meal, Karen agreed to become her brother's lawyer upon returning home. As we drove down the familiar driveway to my childhood home, I couldn't help but think about what was waiting for us. The house had the atmosphere of the classic 60s. It was cozy and well-built. When Karen entered the house, her eyes were shining with joy. I brought her a beer, turned on some vintage records that I inherited from my parents, and we settled on the couch, enjoying the music of Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and Frank Sinatra. It was as if we were transported back to childhood, surrounded by familiar melodies that our parents loved. We took our time, trying to make everything the same for us. Kendra, on the other hand, was unhappy. Accustomed to the fact that everything goes on as usual, she could not accept our slowness. Kendra desperately tried to contact her husband, Colin, but all her efforts were to no avail. There was no evidence that he boarded a plane, rented a car, or made any other departure. Private detectives were unable to find any trace of him. His Facebook page was deactivated, and his credit card was canceled at his request by Bank of America. All the searches she conducted led to a dead end. His lawyer called every day and asked for the name of her own lawyer. She didn't even think about hiring him, believing that their marriage could still be saved. Colin even managed to erase all his contacts from their old phone log. She knew that he had relatives who could shed light on his whereabouts, but she no longer had a choice. Kendra couldn't remember their names. His family had never meant much to her, so she didn't pay attention to it. He carefully erased all evidence of his existence, to the point where she couldn't even recover his social security number. Even her daughters began to worry. He has always kept in constant contact with them, but since he disappeared, no one has heard a word from him except David, who has remained silent. David asked his eldest daughter, Carrie, not to get in touch until he proved that little Colin was his son, but he didn't seem in a hurry to do so. When Carrie met David, he responded with laughter, which did not match the expected behavior of her husband. Colin's actions were out of character, and this made Kendra desperate. Colin had always been reliable and responsible, but now she had to hire a man to perform his usual duties. The hired assistant did not provide the level of care and love that Colin showed. This situation strained everyone involved, especially Kendra's relationship with her daughters. If Colin had continued to carry out his duties, their family life would not have deteriorated. Her daughters unfairly blamed her for the problems in their relationship, which was completely unfair. Colin was not coping with his duties. Every woman should be responsible for her life. Every man in a relationship should understand that a woman is the main one. When Kendra comes into conflict with Colin, she will make him answer for the mistreatment of her and their children. There is something so serene and beautiful about sitting on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise. Karen admitted that she still doesn't understand why her parents started their day that way. The feeling that she was surrounded by the love and gratitude of the universe and her companion gave her confidence that she would cope with any task. Sitting in silence, we both understood the world in the same way. As I held her hand, repeating a gesture my father often made with my mother, I realized that sometimes words are not needed to convey a message. As I was driving home, it dawned on me that I was rediscovering my true self and throwing off the facade thrown over me. A transformation was already taking place inside me. I feel a sense of security and peace that I've never felt before, I muttered to myself. I noticed a similar change in you last night when you came up to me. The indescribable feeling of liberation is just palpable. Judging by your words, you are also under his influence. This new environment is a cultural shock to me, where everything seems sincere and there is nothing artificial. Here you can finally hear your own thoughts clearly, I told Karen. A peaceful morning was conducive to reflection. I forgot how beautiful and soothing it is. Such moments remind us of the quality of life, which can only be felt when two hearts are really synchronized, Karen noted. Last weekend was a turning point for both of us. We began to learn more about ourselves, although we did not succumb to the temptation to take our relationship to the physical level. We both wanted something deeper than just a physical connection. The first meeting with her parents was a positive experience. I was sent to work to fix several things in their house, including the mechanism on their tractor. After spending about 4 hours at work, we eventually got a serviceable car that drove smoothly. Karen saw me for the first time in oil, grease, and dirt. She watched me clean up her parents' back room, and the smile never left her face. Dirty rooms, as my mother often mentioned, were created so that husbands would not bring dirt into the house. Karen's father expressed gratitude, mentioning that the tractor would have been out of order for a week if I hadn't come and fixed it. Her mom was thrilled at the thought of her only daughter coming home. Saying goodbye to her at the airport on Sunday evening was somber. It's been 2 months since I left California, and life at home has been getting better. Kendra finally found a lawyer, and the court approved the decision to divide the property in equal shares. Karen's husband continued to behave stupidly, sparing money at every opportunity. David and Carrie attended marriage counseling to cope with the problems that arose in connection with the birth of a child. Progress was slow, but they attended weekly classes and made progress. Carrie's view of the situation changed when she was confronted with the other side of the story. Meanwhile, baby Colin, my grandson, appeared. He was growing up fast. I couldn't wait to be reunited with my grandson, whom I was looking forward to. Kendra and Carrie's divorce left them both with shattered faith and hope as they betrayed their husband's trust. It was a painful realization, but I couldn't deny it. The bond between my ex-wife and her daughters has been irreparably changed. I returned to Lodi on a private jet, having been assigned to test the company's newest model for mass production. This was the most important final check that had to be passed before moving on. I devoted the next 2 weeks to making sure that the project was strong, durable, easy to move, and maintainable. The company arranged for me to stay at the Hampton Inn and Suites in the city. In the evening, Amber, Hopper, and Karen decided to have dinner at the hotel restaurant. They were already sitting at the table when I entered. Amber greeted me with a smile as I approached their table. Earlier in the day, we met over a cup of coffee to make sure everything was going according to plan. Standing behind them, I heard a conversation between my daughter and her mother. "Hi, Mom. I invited a friend to join us, so why don't you move a little in the booth?" Amber suggested. "I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to see him," she added. "What's going on?" Karen asked, moving away to make room. "He's just a man I've met in the last 5 weeks. Meadow and I think we'll enjoy spending more time with him," Amber explained, sitting down in an armchair. Karen turned to me, and a big smile spread across her face as she recognized me. Over the past 2 months, I've grown a mustache and goatee, creating the illusion of weight loss, while in fact, my fat has turned into muscle. Karen expressed her surprise at my new look, noting that she really likes it. Curious about my unexpected presence, she asked about my plans. I told her that I had come to enjoy a pleasant dinner with a friend and her daughter, where I was going to explain everything. I thanked Amber for helping me organize this surprise. Just as we were about to place an order, Meadow appeared, apologized for being late, and took her place at the table. During dinner, I told them that I had come to the city to test a new model, which is scheduled to be released in 3 years. The main innovation was that the large tractor would run on natural gas. If it works properly, farmers will be able to build a gas station on their site for an additional fee. The cost of the equipment will include the necessary components for the filling pump. Considering that natural gas is cheaper and cleaner than gasoline, we believed that we had a very popular product. If the test model had been successful, we would have been 1 step closer to putting it on the market. The company planned to include it in a new product line. Before we ordered dessert, Karen's daughters asked about our plans. "Do you two expect to move to South Dakota before classes start in September?" Meadow asked. Karen confirmed their move. "Mom, how far is Vermilion from our new home?" Amber asked. "About 40 miles from the farm," Karen replied. "Why are you asking?" Karen asked. "This fall I will begin my MBA at the University of South Dakota," Amber explained. "Can I stay with you? If not, can I stay with Uncle Joseph?" Amber asked. She chose this school because it is one of the most affordable options in the country. Karen's smile was bittersweet as she tried to hold back the tears. I reached for her hand and squeezed it tightly. "You were right. It's good that we're building a new 4-bedroom house," she said quietly. "It will be finished next month," I said with a smile. Karen continued, "We wanted to be prepared for both of you to decide to come. So, tell Mom what colors you want for your rooms." Meadow was surprised. "Did you plan for us to come?" Karen confessed, "We rather hoped. We wanted you to make your own decision. If I had put pressure on you, you would have shifted the blame to Colin. As a result, he would have suffered the consequences of this misconduct," Karen said. "How did you come to this conclusion, Mom?" Amber asked. "Colin asked me if I believed in your ability to make the right choice. I assured him that I believe," she explained. "And then he said that we should trust both of you because our bond is stronger than with your father," Karen added. Amber and Meadow exchanged confused glances. Amber spoke up. "The first night we met, you were able to appreciate us. By the time we left, you already knew about our decisions, didn't you, Colin?" "I knew you were getting a college degree, Amber, and that it could take you anywhere. But my attention was on Meadow. When she started talking about the importance of respect, I already had a premonition of how events would develop," I explained. "The hardest part was convincing Mom that everything would work out in the end. The uncertainty of the situation was frightening, but time will eventually provide the necessary answers," I added. When we finished dinner and got ready to leave, Karen and I planned to watch a movie. Meanwhile, Amber and Meadow were returning home. It was at this point that Kendra noticed me, pulling up in her car just as I was opening the door for Karen. It took her a few moments to recognize me by my new appearance. My lifestyle has undergone significant changes. Now I wasn't sitting at the table but was working energetically in the barn, stoking the wood stove and doing a thorough cleaning. Physical labor has developed my muscles, giving me new strength that I haven't experienced in many years. The once noticeable belly disappeared, replaced by a slimmer physique, making me look younger and more energetic, relieving the stress that had been weighing me down for so long. I felt like a new person, born again. Those parts of me that were suppressed by past relationships have finally manifested, have been released. After dropping Karen off after the movie, I went back to my room and asked to be woken up in the morning. The guards greeted me and let me in, looking forward to seeing the completed new design for the first time. This was the part I liked the most, watching the finished product ready for final approval before mass production. Research and development can be tedious, but when you see tangible results, it's all worth it. When I saw the final product in all its glory, I realized that all the hard work was worth it. I eagerly began testing it before the rest of the team arrived. I quickly identified a few minor changes that needed to be made and redirected the power line so that it would not be directly heated. I have already documented these changes for the final report. Everyone was impressed with my progress, and the president even looked in on me when I was using a test tractor to move and push 2,000 pounds. He easily coped with the task and maneuvered smoothly. As we made our way through the muddy bottom created for our trials, he couldn't help but grin as he watched me in blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and a blue baseball cap, turning backwards, effortlessly driving a massive tractor as if it were my own. The gears shifted smoothly, and the tractor's arms easily lifted the heavy load we needed. Despite all my attempts to turn it over, the tractor stood steadily on all fours. I even dared to drive off the ramp on 2 wheels to watch him land safely on the ground, demonstrating impeccable balance. "You're still the best employee. If you could hold this tractor on your head, you would have done so," the president of the company praised. "What do you think of this impressive car?" he asked. "If she copes with the tasks that I set for her, she will easily enter the top 5 best developments that we have ever created. So far, it exceeds all expectations. Only a few minor improvements are required. And it's also more economical than a standard diesel engine," I added, holding out my hand. "Good to see you again," he replied with a grin. "Your former position is at your disposal if you want," the president added. Seeing you, I understand why you decided to move forward. Where did you find the fountain of youth? The president asked. He had no idea that he had stumbled upon the key to how I evaluate a new product. I approached it with the same attitude as I did my old truck, treating it like an old, battered thing. By the end of the day, I admitted that he was doing well, and there were 9 more to come. When I returned to the hotel, it was almost 7 in the evening. When I entered the hall, I saw my daughter Carrie and her husband David waiting for me. Carrie was holding little Colin in her arms. I walked into the room looking like I'd just climbed out of a mud pit and was in desperate need of a shower. Carrie noticed me and came towards us. "Hi, Dad," she greeted me. "You look good. Do you have a minute to chat with us?" she asked. I glanced at David, who gave a barely perceptible expression of approval. "Of course, but let me get myself cleaned up first," I replied. David joined us soon after, and I suggested, "You two can either wait here or go up to the room with the kitchen. We can order food delivery or have lunch downstairs," Carrie suggested. "Any option is fine with me," I replied. "Let's go to your room and order food while you take a shower," Carrie suggested, hinting at a long overdue private conversation. Following her suggestion, we ordered the desired dishes through the room service. After a quick shower, I called Karen and brought her up to date, promising to call her back later. I opened a bottle of Crown Royal and poured us all drinks. The kids asked for Coca-Cola, so I diluted it with a little water and stirred it before serving. "Dad, David and I have faced a lot of problems over the last couple of months. It was only after the conversation you stumbled upon that everything became clear," Carrie said seriously. "I just moved home last week. Mom has been hinting at problems in our relationship outside the family for several years. We all assumed that you were aware and gave your consent. Mom justified her actions by claiming that you and she have different intimate needs. David and I were at an impasse, and I decided to take a lie detector test to confirm to both of us what I can or cannot do. Without it, we were on the verge of divorce," Carrie said. "I've already told you. I want you both to understand that in order to restore a new healthy relationship, it will take time and complete honesty," I said. I hugged my grandson, hugging him to my chest, and he put his head on my shoulder, by asking David to capture this moment in a photo. I realized that I was repeating my mother's behavior in some ways. She justified her actions based on her own point of view, not realizing that it still doesn't make them right, says Carrie. I used to act without thinking, and it was so natural, but now I've found that I pause before every action to think. To be honest, it's a little surprising, Carrie said. Dad, I noticed another side to her that I didn't even know about. It gave me hope that our relationship has a chance of success, David said. Just remember that it takes time, open communication, and a sincere willingness to listen with your heart and mind. You are both young, so feel free to ask for help or advice if necessary, I said. Kendra allowed public expectations to cloud her mind, which eventually led her to reasonably break her marriage vows. I'm sure she still blames me for the breakup of our relationship, I said. I made it clear to my sisters that I'm not going to listen to Mom's excuses anymore. I was determined to save my marriage. After a heated argument, I insisted that we could talk as soon as they came to common sense. Until then, I had no time to waste, Carrie said. When the food was brought to us, I felt grateful that I could share the meal with my family. Carrie asked about my dietary habits, to which I laughingly replied that I just became more physically active, not mentally. My body reacted positively to the changes. Gone are the days when I spent hours sitting at the table or on the couch. When they left, it was already 10 o'clock in the evening. When they were saying goodbye, Carrie hugged me and said softly, I like your new side, Dad. I laughed and explained that after the divorce, hidden aspects of myself surfaced. My long-term relationship with her mother has unknowingly affected me in a way that has only become clear now. I texted Karen to see if she was still awake. She said yes, and I called her and told her how the evening had gone. The saying, time heals all wounds, is often repeated, but I think it is not entirely true. It just means accepting what happened. It doesn't erase the pain or fix the situation, no matter how some might claim. It's about learning to adapt and come to terms with what can't be changed. About 7 o'clock the next evening, I entered the lobby of the Hampton Inn, where my 2 youngest daughters were eagerly waiting for me. As soon as I saw them, I immediately realized that Kendra had caught them in something, and I was not mistaken. The twin daughters wasted no time in coming into conflict with me about my behavior towards their mother. They thought it was cowardly of me to leave my mom, and they were determined to tell me what they thought. So I took them to my room so they could have some privacy before they started lecturing me about my decision to leave the marriage. They admitted that their marriages broke up because their husbands, like me, found it difficult to accept their independence as modern women. Dissatisfied with their behavior, I called the guards. When they arrived, I demanded that my daughters be removed because I was not interested in their actions. My daughters were escorted out the back door and warned not to come back. Hampton Hotel staff and security have made it clear that they will not tolerate insulting guests at their hotel. Karen found my action funny and noticed that young ladies would reflect on the consequences of their actions without love. She offered to tell Amber and Meadow about it, to which I agreed. Later, Carrie called and applauded me, saying that my revelation had opened her sister's eyes to the fact that everyone is responsible for their actions. They had just left here, and tears were still streaming down their faces. I couldn't help but chuckle, because none of them gave me a chance to explain anything. Their actions clearly indicated that they were not interested in listening to my explanations. In the end, I had no choice but to call. The security service checked their background, which turned out to be clean. The twins tried to justify their actions, but given their different surnames, it was hard to believe. I reminded them that when their casual partners treated them to dinner, they should have been more circumspect. It made me feel better that I would never go down this path. Now I'm ashamed that I even discussed it, Carrie said. Did David know about our conversation? I asked. He overheard everything and was pleasantly surprised by my explanation. It was good for both of us to look at things sensibly. How could our mother convince us that her actions were acceptable? Carrie wondered. My twin daughters are experiencing serious difficulties. It will be a long time before they can truly overcome their difficulties. Until now, they did not realize that their behavior was no different from the behavior of people from the street, whom they had condemned for so long. Carrie remarked, Mom criticizes you for your actions. Has she ever thought about how our own behavior and her actions affect you? Or was she only thinking about herself? This is a question I'm still struggling with. Mom always looked at the world through rose-colored glasses, I said. Using her progressive views, your mom makes everything and everything acceptable, I added. In order for me to see the reality of the world as it is, I needed to be caught. It's sad that a large part of our society is so blind to the truth that looks them right in the face, Carrie said. Carrie, you've learned something that many adults will never understand in their lives, I said. What is it, Dad? My eldest daughter asked. I urge you to think carefully and logically about even the simplest things. This is the key difference between your mother's approach and my approach to life. Welcome to my reality. Unfortunately, you had to learn this lesson the hard way, I said. On Wednesday evening, I joined Karen's family for dinner. The girls were looking forward to the opportunity to organize and prepare for the move. I shared the information I received from Carrie the night before. After the meal, we started washing the dishes together. I washed and the girls dried and cleaned. The girls caught us kissing and didn't stop teasing us all evening. On Friday evening, Karen and I were preparing for a romantic dinner at the Pier restaurant. As we were sitting facing each other and enjoying a drink before ordering, the twins suddenly walked in. The owner of the restaurant informed us that our daughters had noticed us and wanted to join our table. I hesitated, but Karen quickly agreed, saying that we would be happy if they joined us. You can't just ignore the situation with them. I know you're upset about them, but deep down you care about them, Karen insisted. I reluctantly agreed with Karen's words, realizing that she was telling the truth. As we watched the waitress escort my daughters to our table, it became clear that they were carrying a heavy burden. I refrained from talking until they had taken their seats. I confidently introduced my daughters to Karen, my lawyer friend. "If you have come to criticize me further, please leave," I said firmly. "Dad, we need to hear this," Faith chimed in. "We had a difficult conversation with Carrie on Tuesday evening. She was extremely honest with us, leaving us no room for excuses. We hoped for support, but instead we were confronted with the harsh reality of our actions. By the end of the conversation, we were forced to admit the truth about ourselves. It may not be very pleasant, but it is necessary," Faith concluded. "Carrie made it clear that we are rewarded for our work as women who lead an immoral lifestyle, but with a different approach. We discussed our behavior among ourselves and realized that many people on the streets are doing this out of necessity and not of their own free will," says Hope. "Unlike them, we participated in this for fun, mistakenly believing that our actions were harmless. Realizing this made our behavior even more disturbing. When we returned home, we told Mom about the situation, which led to a heated argument. In the midst of the disagreement, Mom accused us of being influenced by conservative beliefs," Faith says. "Who cares if people are hurt? They should harden up and stop whining. In this messy society, the only thing that matters is not getting caught. Social crimes have no consequences. Just look at the corrupt politicians in our government who get away with any illegal activity. It just proves that the laws only apply to certain people," Hope ranted in the words of her mother. "Nothing is ever unambiguous. We all have the right to live the way we want. Our mom doesn't even feel guilty about what she did." "That's when it dawned on us," Faith added. "As teachers, we try to instill in our students a sense of good and evil, but our actions have muddled the waters. We are here today because we have rented a furnished 2-bedroom apartment nearby, which we will call home for the next 6 months. The location is convenient, not far from the school where we both work. We consider this to be the first step in rebuilding our lives free from the influence of our mother's deceitful ways. Hope and I will move in tomorrow as our mother will be busy at a political event," Faith explained. "After meeting you, we both came to the understanding that we should apologize for our previous misunderstandings. Dad, now we understand that you did what you had to do, having no other choice. If you had confronted us directly, it would have been a difficult situation for all involved. We needed to find our own way to resolve the situation. Sometimes it's better to let events unfold naturally," Hope said. "I said I've already forgiven you because I think your actions were influenced by your mother. As for Kendra, I'm ready to forgive her, but I won't give her another chance," I told my daughters. "Her behavior has always been selfish and calculating." Despite this, I handed them my mobile phone and asked them to enter their contact details. They complied and included my new number in their contacts. "What's the code for this number?" "South Dakota," I replied. "God, you're back at Grandpa's farm. He'd be proud of you," Faith exclaimed, smiling broadly. "Do you know this farm?" Karen asked. "Yes. Our father made sure that the 3 of us spent every summer there when we were growing up," Hope explained. "In high school, we adopted typical teenage moods. One of our most vivid memories is learning to drive on Grandpa's tractor with Dad as an instructor. He drove us and brought us back, always engaging us in conversation along the way. Mom, on the contrary, seemed to forget about us while we were away from home, and Grandma noticed her frivolity," recalls Hope. This unexpected reunion turned into a joyful dinner, during which we recalled the time we spent on the farm and the valuable lessons we learned from our family's life. The twins were told about the new house under construction and the reason for my presence in the city. They found out that Karen has 2 daughters who are several years younger. While we were having dinner, Hope received a text from her older sister asking how they were doing. In response, Hope said that they were having dinner with Dad and his girlfriend Karen, and that she and Faith would come later to explain everything. Walking along the pier and enjoying a leisurely stroll, we were surprised at how everything gradually falls into place. "I'm surprised. You're moving away from them, leaving them to figure things out on their own," Karen said. "My father once told me that if you give a man enough rope, he will eventually hang himself." I agreed, noting that a person's actions often reveal their true nature. If I had been present, 4 people would have united against one, but instead, they turned against themselves. It was their own sense of honesty and ethics that led them to collapse. As Karen wisely pointed out, evil flourishes only when others act on it. Too many people in our society shift the blame onto others instead of taking responsibility for their own actions. In many ways, I became their scapegoat. I can't justify their actions because, in my opinion, they were never justified, I shared. "It might seem like a weakness to Kendra that can be used against you," Karen said, "but I consider it one of your greatest strengths. Your honesty and principles are reflected in your actions. You are not easily persuaded by those who have no morals. You stand firmly by your beliefs," Karen said. Kendra returned home, looking forward to reuniting with her twin daughters. The political event she attended on Saturday started later than she expected. Despite her fatigue, she really wanted to spend time with her girls and maybe even offer them a break in the evening. But remembering their recent quarrel, she couldn't help feeling anxious. On reflection, she realized that she had crossed the line. The quarrel happened because she saw the negative traits of their father in her children, and she couldn't bear to see them go down this path. Absent-mindedly taking a Coke from the fridge, she noticed 2 house keys lying on the counter next to a short note. It said that they had moved out and did not want to have anything to do with the personality she had helped them form. The note was signed by Faith and Hope, which left her in shock and pain. Carrie said that the last time she talked to them was when their father kicked them out of the hotel. She hasn't heard from them since. "Why did the father kick the twins out of the hotel?" Kendra asked. "They wanted to tell him how badly he treated you. They attacked him, verbally insulted him. My father got tired of it, and he called security. The guards escorted them out the back door because they thought they were high-class escort girls. By doing so, they made it clear that their behavior is unacceptable," Carrie said. "But it's not like that, and you know it," Kendra said. "When they came here in tears, they told me their story." "Do you want to know what I told them, Mom?" Carrie asked, her voice full of concern. "Yes, I probably do," Kendra replied, her voice trembling. "I told them that when their friends with privileges whined and were touched, it wasn't like that. They were paid for it in advance," Carrie explained, her voice trembling. Kendra began to cry uncontrollably. Carrie's words hit her hard, causing a wave of fear and uncertainty. She realized that she would never be able to talk directly to her husband, Colin, or be alone with him again, and her heart sank with horror. Kendra quickly realized that what Carrie had said was her father's reality. The mere utterance of these words silently destroyed them all. The simplicity of the statement did not allow a single honest person to challenge it. It was a harsh truth that resonated with everyone who heard it. Weekends spent with casual partners, which used to be perceived as romantic escapades, have now turned into deals. Colin didn't sugarcoat the truth revealed in the video she watched on her return from Vancouver, and it took Kendra 12 weeks to fully grasp its significance. Judging by her behavior, she had been turning her twins into upper-class escort girls for more than a decade, as he believed. No wonder no man could put up with it. It's understandable why he abandoned them. She actually imposed her will on him. It was only now that she saw the situation from his point of view. If his version of events became known, it would be a disaster for her, and he knew it perfectly well. When he left her what she couldn't leave him: her dignity. She single-handedly led to the death of herself and her entire family. Her desire for a progressive lifestyle has gone too far. Her relationship with her husband and daughters collapsed because she refused to admit the truth about her actions. It was not in her nature to take responsibility. Kendra couldn't blame anyone else for her mistakes anymore. The burden rested solely on her shoulders. She destroyed herself. Kendra looked around the house and realized that she had to sell it to start her life with a clean slate. The memories within its walls were a painful reminder of her losses. Confronting reality turned out to be a difficult task. She could easily claim that the house was too big for her, and others would believe her. Eric Hopper would probably be glad to know about her collapse. Karen and I returned to her house after a night of fun. We fell asleep on the couch together, but immediately became victims of Meadow and Amber. They used Karen's phone to send photos to my daughters, who immediately called back. The girls conspired and covered us with a blanket while we were sleeping. When I woke up, I saw an angel in my arms. Glancing at the phone, I saw that it was well past 7 in the morning. Meadow had already woken up and was sitting in an armchair watching us. "It looks like I'm going to have to get used to this sight," she remarked with a grin. "Mom looks very happy and peaceful." She stood up and announced, "I'm going to make coffee for everyone." An hour passed, and the four of us were gathered at the kitchen table, chatting and relaxing, when suddenly the girls announced, "Relatives are coming to visit us at 3 o'clock this afternoon," and Karen and I rushed to get ready. I quickly checked if there was enough fuel for the barbecue, and Karen went to change into something more suitable. After making a grocery list, we popped into my room to freshen up before heading to the local grocery store. When we were about to enter, we suddenly ran into Kendra, who was leaving the store. She stopped in front of me and told me some news. "Colin, please tell the girls that I've decided to sell the house," Kendra said. "If they need anything, Carrie still has the key. Even though they don't get along with me, they can take whatever they need while I'm at work. The same sentence applies to you." I assured her that I would pass this message on to my daughters. Personally, I took everything I needed before leaving. "I'll only be here for 6 days," I told my ex-wife. She nodded and left. We continued to load groceries into the car and discussed our awkward meeting with Kendra. There must be something important going on in Kendra's life that we don't know about. She's kind of detached today, I said. "Maybe it's because the twins moved out?" Karen asked. "No, she didn't mind us being around. She's probably solving some other problem. She is very attached to this house," I replied. Out of the blue, something happened that deeply affected her. During a barbecue with Karen, we found out that the twins had texted their mother, and Carrie had replied. Our 5 daughters got along well with each other, and David and I watched them communicate from the sidelines. Amber and Meadow were fascinated by little Colin. I shared with my daughters what their mother had said at the grocery store, and David mentioned wanting to buy a huge plasma TV. Carrie just rolled her eyes, and I couldn't help but giggle to myself. Our first meeting with 2 families exceeded all expectations. After saying goodbye to our daughters and tidying up, we relaxed over a refreshing glass of beer. Amber said that Faith and Hope decided to end their relationship with their mother in order to open up without her influence. Karen questioned their decision, to which Amber explained that they followed their mother's example and got bogged down in a friends with benefits relationship, which led to the breakup of their first marriages. It was only after breaking up with Kendra that they were able to look at their circumstances from a different angle. Last Tuesday, they gave me a conflict situation because of my attitude towards their mother. As a result, I kicked them out. Later in the evening, during a heated discussion with her older sister, Carrie said that when their privileged friends made love to them and had dinner, they were actually paid in advance for their services, I reported. Amber was in complete shock. After all, Amber and Meadow have been taught since childhood that it doesn't matter how they perceive themselves. What matters is how the world perceives them. People interpret your actions and words in different ways. Our behavior says more about us than words, David said. David's right, Karen said, snuggling up to me. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's why your father's behavior was questionable. It didn't match his words, Karen added, looking at her daughters. As a result, The twins decided to distance themselves from their mother's influence until they could reveal their true selves. They admitted their actions, I explained. I am very proud of them. It was a bold decision for their own growth, I added. The healing process began when they honestly talked about their actions, I concluded. Our words seemed to hit home, because the silence that followed was almost deafening, I noted. When Amber told me that I would make a great father, it brought Karen to tears. The next week was dark, but Karen and I tried to spend time together. The new tractor, named Bits, passed all the tests, and the president was pleased. Before I left, the family gathered to celebrate this event. The twins became close to Karen's daughters and became like family to them. Little Colin was especially attached to Karen, who had a strong maternal instinct, which was manifested in her caring for all children. After long negotiations, Eric and Karen finally came to an agreement on the division of property, with Karen offering him a house in exchange for peace. Eric saw this as an opportunity to get his daughters back and accepted the offer. When I boarded the plane at the end of August and returned home, I saw Karen watching me from afar. The estate was transformed, the old house was demolished, and a new one was built in its place. The barn has been renovated, and the yard has been put in order, creating a wonderful and welcoming environment for the family. I recently finished rebuilding the driveway to the house and barn. To help me transport everything home, Uncle John kindly took me to the airport, where I was supposed to meet the U-Haul truck. Meanwhile, Karen sold her practice and arranged with a lawyer who will handle her divorce in early September. A lot of goods have been delivered to the farm over the past month. Uncle John provided generous assistance in arranging new furniture and helped us get rid of unnecessary items from our parents' belongings, either by donating them to Goodwill or by finding someone who could use them usefully. It was very nice to watch the neighbors unite to help each other. When I arrived at the airport on Friday evening, Karen was already there to meet me. Amber and Meadow were with her. After kissing Karen, I got down on one knee and proposed, to the delight of her daughters. They filmed everything, including how I put the ring on her finger. Amber and Meadow, who knew about my surprise, arranged a grand gala dinner with dinner and dancing in the restaurant. All our daughters and David were there. David, the ladies, and I spent most of the evening on the dance floor. When we arrived at Karen's house, Meadow asked us to wait in the car for a while. With the biggest smile I've ever seen, I was looking forward to what a surprise she had in store for us. He and Amber hurried into the house and returned with a heavy bag for their mother. "Mom, Dad, we've booked a room for you at the Hampton Hotel for the weekend. We won't see you until Monday," Amber announced. When we entered the room, we were greeted by a luxurious basket with 2 bottles of champagne, chocolates, strawberries, glasses, balloons, and roses. A note was attached to it. "Congratulations from your 5 daughters." We stayed in the room all weekend, enjoying the luxurious amenities. On Monday morning, after a delicious breakfast, we went to pick up the U-Haul truck. To our surprise, the rented car turned out to be much larger than expected. I asked about it, but Karen informed me that I would have to wait until noon to find out all the details. At 2 o'clock, the relatives arrived and reported that they were also moving east. They got a job at the Vermilion School Board, not far from where I'm going to live. Karen provided them with furniture, and we helped move things from my mother's house to a rented storage room. They rented a 3-bedroom house through a real estate agent to accommodate Amber during the bad weather. Besides, I've decided to drop the lawsuit against Eric Hopper. Having agreed to pay all my legal fees in Vancouver, we received the divorce certificates at the end of September. On the last Saturday in October, Karen and I exchanged vows in the presence of our mixed family. Carrie and David flew in with little Colin to attend the ceremony. Karen surprised everyone by announcing that we are expecting an addition to the family in May. Our doctor has not yet named the sex of the child, but we are very happy about the new stage in our lives. Kendra, faced with loneliness and anger at me and our daughters, who realized what a bad mother she was and took my side. Kendra began to have mental health problems. which led to Kendra being placed in a psychiatric hospital. Hello, my dear viewer. What are the main signs that may indicate the risk of adultery in marriage? What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments. Well, now let's hear a story about cheaters and retribution. Let's go. It's been 5 years since Janet and I got married. We first met at university, where students were provided with a place in the halls of residence for their first year, but had to find their own housing after that. These halls were more like a mini village, with groups of 3 or 4 students sharing a house together. Although the houses in the village were segregated by gender, the community itself was diverse. The grassy area quickly turned into a lively gathering spot, with people grilling food and socializing. It was there that I first encountered Janet. I was studying veterinary science, while she was pursuing a degree in French business. We had a good connection and went on a few dates during our first year, but neither of us wanted to commit. During our second year, we didn't really spend much time together except for running into each other at the students' union or other social places. In her third year, she did a placement in Belgium, and it wasn't until she came back for her final exams that we decided to officially date. Unfortunately, our relationship only lasted for a year before Janet graduated and began searching for a job. I had 1 more year of school left, and I was determined to finish it without any distractions. In the end, I graduated with top honors, specializing in caring for large and exotic animals. I received numerous job offers, but I decided to work at a practice on the outskirts of town that catered to farms and breeding facilities, as well as regular pet owners. We crossed paths again at a 3-day event. She was hosting a corporate function, and I was there as a guest of one of the owners who had horses competing. We made plans to meet up, and our relationship grew from that point. Janet was employed at an international contracting company, serving as the assistant to the regional sales director. One of her responsibilities was handling customer inquiries and concerns. She also coordinated promotional events for both current and potential clients. Her job also required her to travel throughout Europe. After being together for a year, I finally proposed, and she said yes. We were both 27 at the time. Our life together had been wonderful so far. She had a well-paying job, and my reputation as an animal expert was growing steadily, especially with horses and zoo animals. We had purchased a small farmhouse in need of some TLC, along with a few outbuildings. Our plans included renovating the house and adding an extension for when we eventually started a family. Nestled within its own expanse of land, the house was sheltered by hedges and trees. Once a thriving farm, the fields had been sold off to nearby farmers. However, there was still an old agricultural restriction on the property's deeds, requiring residents to engage in some form of agricultural work. With only a small plot of land remaining, the house had struggled to find buyers. Eventually, the lawyers deemed veterinary work as meeting the criteria for agricultural labor. Thanks to my job, we were able to buy a rural property with potential for development at an unexpectedly low price. Our steady income also afforded us the opportunity to travel extensively. I had some basic knowledge of Spanish from school, and Janet was fluent in French, but had also picked up some German and Italian over the years. We explored Europe together, never considering that Janet might be engaging in any extramarital activities. Some of my wealthy female clients believed their wives' love for horses was enough to keep them occupied. But I had been propositioned enough times to know that not all married women were faithful to their vows. Despite this knowledge, I refused to tarnish the reputation of the veterinary practice that Henry, my partner, had invited me to join. I climbed the stairs cautiously, the sounds of music from the bedroom disguising my footsteps. Upon pushing open the door, I took aim and fired once, hitting her lover in the rear. As he yelped and jumped away from my adulterating client, I quickly reloaded my gun and shot her as well. Her lover regained his composure and attempted to come at me with the intention of inflicting harm. But his efforts only hastened what was bound to happen. He started shaking uncontrollably, then collapsed onto the ground. Janet glanced down at the dart embedded in her side, her expression shifting from shock to fear and finally a glazed confusion as the tranquilizer kicked in. I wasn't foolish enough to use the same weapon I used for putting down wild animals. The dart gun was a familiar tool from my days of working at the zoo, using it to sedate animals for treatment. After administering the tranquilizer, I retrieved the roll of duct tape from the garage and returned to the bedroom to bind their wrists and ankles. Initially, I had planned on gagging them with their own underwear, but ultimately decided against it and just used strips of tape to seal their mouths shut. I descended the stairs, carrying both of them in my arms. The shop was a sturdy old stone structure with walls so thick that it stayed cool inside regardless of the weather. Its previous use for housing animals had left it uncleaned, and the walls still had rings attached for tying up livestock during milking or other tasks. I secured them to 2 of these rings, and then inspiration struck me. After my grandmother passed away, my mother had taken care of her until she passed as well. As I was going through my mother's belongings after her death, I stored most of it in one of the sheds. I still hadn't gotten around to getting rid of it yet. In the midst of all the items were some old surgical supplies that my grandmother needed, including incontinence pants. I grabbed 2 pairs of restraints and released the ones binding my captive's legs. I quickly secured them on both of them and then retaped their legs. After that, I went back to the house and searched through Julian's pockets. I found his keys and decided to check his car as well. By the time my captives regained consciousness, they were sitting in dried animal dung with their wrists bound to 2 rings, practically naked and shivering from the cold. After a refreshing shower, I put on fresh clothes and settled into a plush armchair with a hot cup of coffee and a cozy sweater. My work for the day was complete, and I leaned my shotgun against my leg as I relaxed. I removed the tape from Janet's face, demanding answers. She attempted to appear confident, but her parched mouth and uneasy eyes gave away the truth. I brought the cup of coffee to her lips, and she took a large sip, causing her to gulp it down too quickly. The hot liquid burned her throat as it went down. "You cretin," she gasped after a moment. "Now tell me everything. What do you want me to talk about?" she ranted, her voice full of anger. "How long has this been happening? What exactly has been happening? Now you have some time to think about everything. Upon my return, I expect you to finally come clean and tell me the whole truth." On my way back, I had picked up some incredibly spicy curries. Juggling them with one hand each, I placed the food and water beside the 2 of them, giving them a plastic spoon each. Once they were set, I tore off the tape that was covering their mouths. Both of them eagerly reached for the water and emptied their cups in seconds. I grabbed the containers and filled them up from the outside tap. I strained my ears to hear their hushed conversation, but it was too muffled to make out. Not that it made a difference. Their fate was already decided, and mine by extension. I can't blame Willem and Janet for giving me skeptical looks during the last company meeting. As Julian sneered, "Took you long enough," I could feel my temper rising. I turned the guns towards him, ready to defend myself. "Do you really think I'm afraid? You don't have the courage to pull that trigger." His assumption was incorrect. While rock salt may not typically penetrate skin, I was close enough for it to do some damage. I aimed both barrels at his calf and fired. He let out a high-pitched scream. I considered using the double barrel, but ultimately decided against it. I took a moment to reload before speaking my next words. "Dominic, I love you." It was a difficult decision, but I had to do it in order to keep my job. Julian had been blackmailing me, and I couldn't take it any longer. Julian gasped in pain and told her, "You conniving witch, you've been sleeping your way to the top with half the management." Then he turned to me and demanded, "Call an ambulance for me, right now. If you do, I won't report this to the police." As I loaded another 2 cartridges, I thought to myself, am I really doing this? I aimed for his other calf and pulled the trigger. "U304, I said aloud. My actions would surely land me in jail, but at that moment, I didn't care. 2 more shots pierced his thigh, causing him to squeal in pain. I quickly placed tape over his mouth to ensure he wouldn't make any noise. "So, who were you planning on having intimate relations with in Brussels?" I asked, trying to appear nonchalant. "It was just an exhibition," she responded weakly. "It was just a normal day at work." "So why did he buy flight tickets to Barcelona?" I had no idea he was planning on taking me there. But his actions spoke louder than words, especially with the clothes he packed for you. It was clear that she had been keeping secrets from me for who knows how long. "You couldn't even give me the courtesy of telling me the truth now, so you will have to face the consequences. From what I understand, you won't be returning to the office this week or going to Brussels either. That gives me plenty of time to decide what to do with you, and no one will even notice you're gone." I covered her mouth with duct tape once more. They exchanged looks, and it was clear they finally realized I had complete control over them. To further solidify my dominance, I grabbed the hose and sprayed them with water. Unexpectedly, the mixture of dung and water created a pungent smell that filled the air. Leaving them to ponder their limited future, I sat down with a cup of tea to plan my next move. At this point, I was willing to take any action necessary, even if it meant permanently injuring Julian by shooting him in the legs. I knew I would inevitably end up in jail for using my gun and falsely imprisoning them, but I had no intention of staying behind bars any longer than necessary. After all, there were countless missing persons whose families were desperate to find them. So I grabbed my video camera and gun and headed back to the buyer's location. The couple huddled together, trembling with fear. Fear was etched in their eyes as I set up the camera and removed the tape from Julian's mouth. Janet's eyes were now filled with desperate pleading, but I paid her no attention. He pleaded with desperation, "Please, untie my arms." His need to use the bathroom was urgent, but I couldn't help but be frustrated with Julian's audacity. After all, he had been having an affair with my wife. How could he expect me to be kind and accommodating to him now? "If you want me to consider your request, you'll have to give me something in return. Anything will do." He felt a glimmer of hope. "Maybe there was a way to resolve this. I can offer me the car or the boat. I'll transfer them to your ownership. Just specify what you desire. I'm willing to give you whatever you want." It slipped my mind, but he did have a lovely cabin cruiser. A thought was developing in my mind. "You suggested targeting half of the management, but I also wanted to uncover who else Janet had been involved with. If I managed to stay under the radar, maybe I could get revenge on them as well." "What?" "You claimed she was having affairs with half of the management. Can you give me specific names?" "I can't. Revealing that information could cost me my job. So, do you want to suffer the consequences alone? I have the entire week to convince you. You won't be returning until Saturday, so no one will even realize you're gone until then." I lightly pressed on his injured leg, causing him to flinch in pain. "I need to go to the bathroom. You're wearing special pants for incontinence. I'll let you go when I'm ready." "What about Janet?" "She needs to use it too." "Who is that? Chivalry." "She's the one who stabbed me in the back. You just happened to be caught in the crossfire. I have no feelings for you whatsoever. You knew what would happen if you crossed me. Consider yourself lucky that you still have all your limbs intact. You still have the option to leave this situation, but if you decide to involve the authorities, things will only escalate for you. While I may end up in prison, I am confident that I will eventually be released." Although I tried to maintain a calm facade, inside I was filled with fear and uncertainty. "Please," he pleaded through muffled words as I covered his mouth once again to silence him. I gave them a few minutes to think before I turned to leave. But before I left, I freed their hands from the rings. Back at the house, I began packing for my departure. Julian's offer to provide his boat gave me an idea. When my mother went into labor early, my parents were vacationing in Ireland. It was a scary time, and there were doubts about whether I would make it. They had to register my birth in Ireland since that's where I was born. Even though they re-registered me once we returned home, I still held on to my Irish birth certificate. I quickly grabbed my important papers, some clothing items, and the euros that Janet and Julian had set aside for their trip to Spain. And of course, I didn't forget to bring along my beloved stamp collection. In the morning, I had planned to visit the bank and retrieve the special collection from our safety deposit box. Our house was heavily mortgaged, as we had invested all of our savings into it. We were relying on both of our incomes to make ends meet. The original plan was to take a risk while we were young and let future pay raises and increasing property values handle our financial stability in the long run. Janet was aware of my stamp collection, but she dismissed it as a childish hobby and didn't see any worth in it. However, I knew the true value of my carefully curated collection. That night, I struggled to sleep and woke up feeling ill. It was clear that Janet and her lover had also not slept well. Their presence had left a distinct scent in the room. It was obvious that the curry had taken its toll on them. What they didn't know was that I had added a laxative to their tea. Janet attempted to speak to me, pleading for me to allow her to use the restroom. "I really need a shower. I feel raw and irritated, both physically and emotionally." "You can wallow in your deceptions with your lover. I don't care, dear wife." I could see the surprise and fear in their expressions, signaling that I was successfully infiltrating their thoughts, if they cooperate and provide the information I want. But even I wasn't certain if that was a truthful promise. This time, I physically separated them and secured ear defenders on Janet's head using tape, just like I do when shooting a gun. Next, I positioned the camera. "Julian," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you know where the keys for the boat are?" His face lit up with anticipation. "They're on my key ring," he replied. "You can find the keys for my apartment on the same key ring. Inside the wardrobe there is a small safe containing $10, and its key is also on the ring. You can have everything. Just give me a few minutes to freshen up, and I'll be out of your hair for good. I have no intention of involving the police, believe me." Isn't it amusing when a conceited lowlife begins to plead for mercy? However, I made a mental note of the information for future use. "Where can I find the boat?" "It should be at the harbor. Birthday party on the 20th at the end of the pier." Allow me to reflect for a moment. While I ponder, you were about to share your thoughts with me and my trusty electronic companion here. I gestured towards the surveillance cameras that captured my wife's infidelity, demanding answers. I wanted to know who she had been cheating with, when it started, and where it happened. I also needed to know who else knew about their affair. And just to be clear, my wife would soon be giving her own account of what happened. So be honest and don't leave out any details. He began his confession. To my surprise, I discovered that her affair had only been going on for a year. But at the same time, I was shocked to learn that it had been happening for such a long time. I had prepared myself for the possibility that she had been unfaithful throughout her entire employment with the company, but I held on to the hope that it was a recent development. It all started at the Dusseldorf Expo last year during the final night when the management team went out to dinner and some of the men decided to go to a lap dancing club. I had planned to arrange a taxi for Janet and Belagardis from the Brussels office to take us back to the hotel, but they were curious about the lap dancing craze, so we stayed. Vim bought them a few drinks, and eventually they received a lap dance. They were hesitant at first, but soon became engrossed in the experience. Janet even claimed she could perform better, and things quickly took a downward turn from there. Despite their attempts, the management wouldn't allow her and Belle to dance. After a few more drinks, we made our way back to the hotel. Janet and Belle had a suite and wanted to make it up to us for almost getting us kicked out of the club. Honestly, James, what would you have done in that situation? Both of them were attractive. None of us could resist the temptation of a dance. He gave me a guilty look, like a mischievous puppy who knew it was in trouble. It was almost comical. "Go ahead," I urged him with a smirk. "You know the story." "Wait, no, I don't. How does a wife end up cheating on her husband? Any sympathy immediately disappears. Apparently, they started taking off their clothes and things got a little too competitive. Janet unzipped Jan's pants and some madness began. Eventually, 6 of us joined in the fun, and there were more of us than the original couple. From then on, we met regularly whenever there was an exhibition. A girl from the French branch and German office started attending our gatherings 6 months ago, adding a new dynamic. He seemed to feel guilty about something, and I couldn't blame him. We never used names, but it was always clear who we were talking about. As for me, well, I was a given in this group. In attendance at the meeting were Jan Witters and Wim van der Krauweson from the Brussels division, Otto Visser representing Dortmund, and Christoph Delmas from the Strasbourg branch. Julian had initially promised 6 attendees, but he avoided making eye contact with me as he muttered, "Brian Eckquart." My blood boiled at the mention of that slimy UK manager for their company who was known for his arrogance, thievery, and dishonesty. Not only was he wealthy, but he was also worth a fortune. Once his wife discovered that he had been having an affair, she divorced him. But using his money and connections, he left her with almost nothing to survive on. He made sure she couldn't receive legal aid, and the lawyer she could afford was no match for his resources. I should have picked up on it when Julian mentioned the scandal started at an expo. That bottom feeder never passed up a chance for freebies. The women in question were Belgardus Lachuten, Amélie Faudron, and Bergathon. They were all married as well. I convinced him to recount everything he could remember, and I documented it all. It made my stomach turn. He claimed that the women had initiated and participated in the events, even though the company executives had taken advantage of them. After hearing his side of the story, I didn't have the emotional fortitude to listen to Janet's version. However, I knew I needed to hear her perspective. My mind was torn between seeking further retribution against both of them or setting them free, hoping they wouldn't go to the authorities. I took the camera to Janet. "I demand the truth from you. Julian's story has been heard, and now your fate depends on what you tell me." Her version was similar to Julian's, except that she had been intimate with Julian and Brian. It was just meant to be a way to pass the time. Sometimes things can get so dull. I didn't mean any harm by it, and you weren't missing out on anything. I wasn't even home at the time, she argued in her defense. You really do not understand men at all, do you? Those despicable individuals were judging the man whose wife was unfaithful and sleeping with anyone and everyone. Meanwhile, I remained faithful to a lying, cheating partner. My anger was escalating once more. They would pay dearly for their actions. In my blinded state, I no longer cared about the potential consequences of my actions. I hope you savored that moment because your intimate experiences will be nothing but memories from now on, my dear. I pulled her back into Julian's arms with a burning fury in my stomach. I couldn't bear to see them in such agony any longer. They needed some relief and a glimmer of hope to keep going, so I reluctantly gave in and allowed them to stand up and stretch their muscles. I carefully cut the tape on their legs, but left their wrists bound for my own safety. As they struggled to get to their feet, I winced at their screams as blood returned to their numb limbs. Carefully, they stretched and contorted their bodies to ease the pain of their cramps. And as soon as they came to their senses, the cheaters tried to escape. Julian attempted to flee towards the exit, but I easily pushed him back down onto the ground as well. "You shouldn't have done that," I scolded them as I pulled them back to their restraints. "I was kind enough to allow you some movement, and this is how you repay me, with violence. You promised you wouldn't go to the authorities, but here you are, attempting to flee. Did you really think you could outrun your fate? It's clear that I still can't trust you. You haven't learned a thing. Of course not." I tied their gags back in place, and feeling a bit mischievous, I sprayed them with the hose once more before walking back to the house. I had some time to come up with a plan, about 3 or 4 days before anyone would start looking for them, and maybe a couple more before anyone realized something was wrong. But then again, with their behavior being so well known, people may just assume they ran off together. However, I couldn't rely on that assumption. I surveyed the items I had collected. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get me started. With my birth certificate in hand, I could go to Ireland and create a new identity for myself. My plan was to use cash and public transportation as often as possible in order to stay under the radar. I would have to be cautious around stations and ports, as those are likely places where I could be tracked. Out of all the countries in the world, Britain boasts the most CCTV cameras. I turned on Julian's laptop and mapped out a bus route to Holyhead, assuming it would be a bustling terminal that would take me to Dublin. I could easily blend into the crowds and have access to more areas of Ireland than if I went through Rosslare. To ensure that I left no trace behind, I wasted no time in getting moving immediately. I had to guarantee their lives. According to the rule of 3, a person can last 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. I returned to the buyer with a large container of water and allowed my captives to drink from it. Of course, I had laced the water with a sedative, so once they were unconscious, I set up intravenous giving sets with saline drips. After connecting all the bags of fluid and adjusting the drip control, I estimated that 5 liters should be enough to sustain them for the next few days. As tempting as it was to revel in my triumph when they woke up from the sedative, I knew I was in a difficult situation and needed to stay focused. So, I resisted the urge to gloat. Before I departed, a new thought crossed my mind. Gently, I removed the tape from their mouths to prevent any choking. After double-checking their restraints, I locked the door and gathered my equipment before getting into Julian's car. As long as you appear confident, no one pays much attention to you. I approached his front door, checking for any signs of an alarm system. Once I confirmed there wasn't one, I unlocked the door with his key and entered the house. I quickly located the safe, took the money, and made my exit. Despite the temptation to search for evidence linking him to my wife's affair, I resisted and left with only his laptop and the incriminating video recording. Driving to a rundown area of town, I parked in a deserted lot used as a free parking spot. I left the keys on the center console and didn't bother to close the door properly. I grabbed my rucksack and walked away, knowing that by the time I reached Ireland, the car would be dismantled and its parts shipped off to Saudi Arabia or the Balkans. With British cars having right-hand drive, they are often stripped for parts instead of being sold as a whole. This makes smuggling them out much easier. Next, I strolled over to the marina without a care in the world. I walked down the jetty, hopped onto a boat, and started the engine. Ignoring any potential consequences, I released the ropes and set off on my journey. I sailed along the coastline until I found a secluded cove and maneuvered the boat into it. After unloading my rucksack, I left my grip with important documents and cash on board, along with a few empty bottles of whiskey. Then, I mapped out a course towards Spain, aimed the boat southward, and let it sail away into the open sea. She was determined to continue sailing until she ran out of fuel, and I had no idea how far that would be. After securing the pack on my back, I set off towards the bus station and followed the planned route to reach Holyhead. From there, I purchased a round-trip ticket as a foot passenger to Dublin. Once I arrived, I made the decision to take a walking journey and explore the country where I was born. The first bus happened to be heading towards Kildare, so I decided to go there. 3 days into my extended holiday, I found myself sitting outside a pub with a view of the Atlantic Ocean. As I sat there, I spotted a cell phone lying abandoned under an empty table. Curiosity getting the best of me, I picked it up and searched for the local police force's telephone number at a nearby cyber cafe. After making the call, I reported a group of individuals attempting to break into a house and provided the address of my previous residence. The operator desperately tried to extract more information from me, but I abruptly ended the call. After wiping down the phone with a cloth, I threw it away in a nearby trash can. A month later, I opted to settle down in Galway and began my search for employment. I had decided to go by Seamus O'Clair instead of my given name James Clark, in an attempt to blend in with the local culture. Many people in Ireland had adopted this practice of converting their names to their Gaelic variants. I found it convenient that no one ever questioned my birth certificate, as I had altered my appearance significantly. My hair and beard were now longer, and I had even changed their color to a subtle ginger shade. The walking tour I had embarked on had helped me shed some weight from my belly, and now, with an address in hand, I could finally apply for important documents like a passport and a driver's license. My ultimate goal was to disappear completely. With my new Irish identity and updated photographs, I had legally become a resident of the country. After losing weight, I made the decision to maintain a healthier lifestyle. I began running regularly and joined a gym. One of the reasons I chose Galway as my new home was because it was a bustling university town with numerous high-tech industries, including many in the pharmaceutical field. If I couldn't find employment as a veterinarian, I could still secure a job in one of these industries. After applying for numerous jobs, I finally landed a position at a company focused on researching animal medications. My main motivation was simply to earn an income. Although I still had some savings, they were dwindling quickly due to my rent payments. In the meantime, I also took the chance to go through Julian's computer and found a wealth of information about MacD, the company that employed them all. I found profiles on Witters, Vander Krausen, Visser, and Dalmas. They were all high-level executives in their region. It was impressive that Janet had managed to secure her place among them. I also discovered that Julian was the British sales manager. Despite my efforts at internet cafes, I could only find a few addresses for them. I couldn't be certain if the email addresses belonged to the right people. All I had available were the company's email addresses. I stumbled upon a file containing passwords, but it was password protected itself. With free time in the evenings, I attempted to crack the code using basic combinations like mother's maiden name and birth dates, but unfortunately, none of them worked. Next, I clicked on his photo folder. One of the pictures was titled "My First Car" and displayed a clear shot of the license plate. I decided to try using the license plate number as the password, and it worked. The file opened up for me to access its contents. He had thoughtfully labeled each password, even including his bank account information. It was tempting to drain his funds, but I didn't want to draw too much attention. However, what truly angered me were the photos and videos he had of their wild parties. Despite my initial aversion, I eventually mustered up the courage to view all of them. As the following weeks passed, anger and jealousy continued to eat away at me. I came up with a plan for revenge against the other person who had wronged me by using the photos and videos I had of them. But first, I had to go through all the evidence and select the most damaging ones. As I reviewed them, one thing caught my attention. Janet was smoking in some of the photos. Knowing she didn't use tobacco, I could only assume she had a prohibited substances habit that I was unaware of as well. But before I could move forward with my plan, I needed to make sure that the police weren't investigating me as a suspect. I wasn't concerned about drawing any attention from the Garda, and I was pretty sure that any inquiry into James Clark wouldn't lead them to Seamus O'Clery. If they did happen to discover my alias, it would likely be pronounced O'Clery in English. Still, just to be safe, I decided to discreetly scan through newspapers for any mentions of my name. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched and wanted to make sure I wasn't giving away my location. As the days went by without getting caught, I started to believe that I could potentially have a new life. The evidence I discovered only added to the complexity of the situation. According to reports, I was deceased, or at least presumed to be dead after my abandoned boat was found. Details about Janet and Julian were scarce, except that they had been found bound and after a reported break-in incident. Just 2 months after I found out about my wife's affair, a report surfaced about the recovery of my boat. Apparently, it had been found by Spanish fishermen who claimed ownership. According to the report, I had supposedly stolen the boat and fallen overboard. It was also linked to the burglary at my house, suggesting that I had faked my death in an attempt to disappear. This meant I could live freely as Seamus, but using the evidence I had gathered might give away my true identity as being alive. My plan was to utilize the company's email directory for MacD and distribute photos to every employee across all branches. Spanish fishermen, That's what I needed. Thankfully, I could speak Spanish fluently. Plus, Spain was part of the European Union, and there were convenient flights from both Cork and Dublin airports. I considered taking a trip to Spain and sending emails from there. After checking flight schedules, I saw that I could leave on a Friday evening and return on Sunday without having to take any time off work. The following Friday, I hopped on a plane bound for Spain. Ever the cautious one, I donned sunglasses and a Panama hat as I made my way through the airports. I wasn't just relying on my beard and hair for disguise. After arriving in Madrid, I immediately checked into my hotel room and went straight to bed. I had 2 laptops with me, my own and one belonging to Julian. I set out early on Saturday to search for an unsecured wireless network in town. It didn't take long to find one. With a mix of hope and frustration, I took Julian's laptop out of my bag and turned it on. To my surprise, it connected easily without needing the second machine. I thought he would have deleted his internet account by now, but since it was still active, I managed to hack into it using the list of passwords I had previously obtained. This created another diversion in my electronic pursuit. The address book was organized by country, so I sent out various messages and attachments to different branches. All the players had their photos sent to every branch, though. I had prepared the messages beforehand, so it didn't take long to send them out. With that done, I took a leisurely walk through Madrid, enjoying the warm autumn sun. I made a mental note to do more traveling once things had calmed down. For dinner, I indulged in tapas and a bold red wine before making my way back to my cozy hotel tucked away on a quiet side street, specifically chosen for its lack of security cameras. I grabbed the hard drive from Julian's laptop and packed it away, just in case I needed the data later on. After a few hours of sleep, I headed to Parque Lineal del Rio Manzanares, a riverside park in Madrid. I followed the river until I found a secluded spot, and then examined the contents of the computer. Feeling satisfied, I returned to Plaza de Santa Barbara to experience the famous nightlife of Madrid. By 3 a.m., I had reached my limit and was ready to call it a night. The city was still buzzing with people, but my adrenaline high had worn off, and I was ready for some rest. After a few hours of sleep at the hotel, I headed back to catch my flight home. For the following year, I was employed by the pharmaceutical company. Galway has a vibrant atmosphere with a large number of young people and all the social activities that come with it. There were plenty of women around, but I was hesitant to commit to anyone. Although I enjoyed my job, I still longed to return to practicing veterinary medicine. I was actively searching for a job when I came across an opportunity in the newspaper one evening. The chance was to buy a practice, so the next morning, I scheduled a visit to see it in person. It turned out that the principal owner, Dermot McCullough, was reaching retirement age. Despite his claims of being 70, he appeared at least 10 years younger. My accent had also developed a slight Irish twang over the year, but he immediately identified me as English. He subtly interrogated me, and I explained that I had been practicing medicine in England, but my wife left me because she found life as a country vet unfulfilling. With no family to tie me down, I spent a few months traveling before settling in Galway and taking on the first available job as I figured out my next steps. He suggested I check the financial records with his accountant, but from my initial assessment, it seemed like a solid business with potential for expansion. The main issue was that he had only been taking care of his neighbors' animals and had not actively pursued any new clients for a long time. To raise the needed funds, I would have to part with my stamp collection. Though technically mine, the core of it belonged to my grandfather and father. That was where the true value lied. I brought it to Sotheby's in Dublin, and at first, the appraiser seemed unimpressed with what he saw. He estimated its value at around 10,000 euros, but I knew it was worth more. Finally, I revealed the part of the collection that I had kept in a secure bank, and his estimation changed. "I'm curious, where did you acquire these?" "My grandfather, father, and I have all contributed to this collection. The British album holds various stamps from England up until the time I left. There's also a set of 2 separated penny blacks that I purchased, as well as another penny black, 2-penny reds, and 2 2-penny blues, one perforated and one imperforate. While the Empire album lacked completeness, it did hold a complete set of stamps from the Falkland Islands. On the other hand, the European album was vast and boasted a full set of Nazi Germany stamps. My grandfather had obtained many collections from struggling Germans during his time stationed in Germany after World War II. These collections were now the foundation of our stamp collection. Unfortunately, the albums I had accidentally left on the boat only contained contemporary stamps with little value. I think the Spanish fishermen have been storing them all this time. Mr. O'Clery, I suggest you bring these albums to our main philatelic department in London for appraisal. There is a significant auction taking place in just 3 months, so if you're considering selling, now would be an opportune time to have them catalogued for potential buyers. Based on my initial assessment, I would estimate their worth to be at least €250,000. I'll take care of it. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. This presented a dilemma. I needed the funds from the sale to buy a veterinary practice, but it looked like I wouldn't be able to get them for at least 3 months. After returning to Galway, I went to see Dermot again. "Sorry, Mr. McCullough," I said with a heavy heart. "I'll need to sell my stamp collection in order to gather enough funds to purchase the practice." He nodded and replied, "The auction isn't until 3 months from now. Perhaps we can come up with a different arrangement. Why don't you work alongside me during those 3 months and we'll see how you mesh with my clients? After that, you can make your decision on whether you still want to make the purchase." And that's exactly what happened. While I was pretty certain the police were not searching for me, I used a bus trip as a cover to get to London. I boarded a bus, then took a ferry, and finally caught another bus straight into the city. Sotheby's agreed to organize and sell my collection and promised to keep me updated on how they plan to divide the items and their valuations, allowing me to set reserves accordingly. After a month had passed, I was informed that the estimated worth of my earnings was approximately £500,000. 2 months later, after commission and fees were deducted, I found myself £900,000 richer. In the span of 3 months, I had formed a strong relationship with Dermot and become an integral part of the local community. Most of our work involved handling large animals and managing farm docks. However, we also ran a small farm to supplement our income by raising beef and lamb. As part of the sale, he included the farm in the agreement. This led to me learning how to raise and purchase animals, as well as how to sell them. With the money from selling stamps deposited into my account, I was able to pay off Dermot for the business and allow him to retire. From then on, I became a veterinarian and part-time farmer, putting a lot of effort into my practice and building up a loyal group of clients. As my reputation as a vet grew, I started to receive more patients for smaller animals as well. Eventually, I opened up a surgery in the town and hired another veterinarian, along with 2 nurses and a receptionist. Despite living in a predominantly Catholic country, there were many women who had gone through failed marriages and were now living separated lives. I'd always been surrounded by single women, so I never lacked for company. But one day, life threw me a curveball. While I was working at the hospital, in came Maureen O'Hara, not the actual actress, but someone who could pass as her twin. She had hit a dog with her car and ran into my office in a panic for help. I went outside to her vehicle and carefully removed the injured animal from the trunk, blood staining my hands as I did so. It was clear to me that the poor creature would not survive. I was also aware of how devastated her owner, and especially her daughter, would be. A quick X-ray confirmed my suspicions. The dog had multiple broken ribs, a fractured skull, and a broken back. The most humane option was to put her to sleep immediately. After cleaning her up, I wrapped her in a blanket to make it appear as if she were simply sleeping peacefully, carefully lifted her into the back seat of my car, and drove her to her rightful owner. Maureen O'Hara had been eagerly waiting for this moment. I don't believe the dog's owners could have been any more anxious or heartbroken. Despite my protests, she insisted on accompanying me. We arrived at their door, and I knocked loudly. "Mrs. Cadogan, I have some unfortunate news about Ferdy. She was hit by a car and suffered severe injuries. I had to make the difficult decision to put her to rest." "Oh, Seamus, did you really have to? Wasn't there any way to save her?" Amidst the tears, I deeply apologized, Mrs. Cadogan. There was nothing I could do to save her. The woman who struck her rushed her to the clinic, but it was too late. Ferdy is waiting in the car. I assumed you would want to personally bury her. Of course, that is what Awifa would have wanted. And there is one more thing. The woman who was involved in Ferdy's accident is here with me. She is also upset and wanted to give an explanation for... Despite her best efforts, she couldn't avoid crossing paths with Ferdy. She darted out from between two parked cars. She wants to apologize and make amends with you. If you don't want to confront her, I can bring Ferdy inside so you won't have to interact with her. And if she brought Ferdy specifically to see you and talk to me, she must be a decent person. I promised to have a conversation with her. Mrs. Cadogan walked me out to my car, and my companion stepped out. "Mrs. Cadogan, I apologize, but I do not know your name," she stated. "Neve Neam Gallagher," our woman replied. "Mrs. Cadogan, I apologize for any inconvenience. I couldn't escape Ferdy, as Mr. O'Clery had warned me. If there's any harm done to your vehicle, please inform me, and I'll arrange for it to be repaired." "Oh no, that won't be necessary. But I would like to get you another dog, if you'll allow me. Let me bring Ferdy in. I told them that her bed is located in the kitchen, so if you could just place her there. When Awifa returns from school, I'll fill her in." Leaving the ladies to continue their conversation, I went inside and arranged Ferdy comfortably in her basket. When I returned to the car, I mentioned that I needed to head back to the office. After noticing the rings on her finger, I escorted Mrs. Gallagher back inside and we headed to the office. She asked how much she should pay for her invasion, but I rejected the idea completely. I refused to accept payment for such a minor favor. She insisted on at least buying me dinner as a token of her gratitude. Would it be appropriate for a married woman to take me out for dinner? I highly doubt my husband would even notice or care wherever he may be. So I handed her my business card and told her to give me a call. We had dinner reservations in Galway on Saturday evening. I put on my nicest outfit and arrived at the restaurant to meet her. During our meal, she revealed that her husband had recently left her. She didn't share any specifics, and I didn't push for more information. In return, I confided in her that I had caught my own wife with another man and decided to leave her. Despite the fact that neither of us had been divorced, we decided to go out for dinner and then hit up a club. We danced briefly before parting ways at midnight. I couldn't help feeling drawn to her and wanting to spend more time together. But reality hit me hard. I was still legally married, even though I had been presumed dead. As much as I wanted to pursue something with her, my current situation made it impossible. Before I could make any decisions, I knew I had to address the unresolved issues from my past. But then again, maybe I was getting ahead of myself. She might not even be interested. To my surprise, she called me on Thursday. "It looked like you weren't going to get in touch, so I took the liberty of calling you. I don't have your contact information." It slipped my mind. "Would you like me to come pick you up tomorrow evening?" "That would be lovely. How does 8 o'clock sound?" "Agreed." "Where to?" She provided her address and I drove over to pick her up for another night of dancing. Before she left, we made plans to meet again on Sunday afternoon. We took a walk along the shoreline, enjoying each other's company and getting to know each other better. This became our routine for the next few months. Then one Friday, she declined my offer to take her out for dinner. "I'll make dinner tonight," she announced as we sat down to eat. Over the meal, she inquired about my slow pace in moving things forward between us. We're both adults with previous marriages. Our relationship is complicated because neither of us is single. We are both still legally married to other people. Let me get this straight. You see this as a long-term commitment? I guess that's accurate. And if we were both previously married, that's where the issue lies. I can never be divorced. Why not? You're from England, right? Divorce is a simple process there. I stood up and leaned in. But trust me, it's much more complicated than you think. I needed to process everything before making any decisions. I should leave now. I'll call you later. However, I didn't end up calling that weekend. Instead, I spent some time wandering around the building, trying to figure out what I should say to her. The consequences of my past actions were weighing heavily on me. I was still trapped by the betrayal of my wife's affair, but I had to uncover the truth about what happened with Janet. Even if it meant facing imprisonment, I couldn't continue living in this limbo. I called Neve on Monday morning and set up a meeting with her for that evening. Before she headed to, I reached her door at 8 o'clock. We chatted in her living room. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked me. "Tea would be lovely," I replied, stalling for a moment before answering. I knew it was time to confront my past and move forward. So I mustered up the courage to tell her everything. Well, at least some of it. I came home to find my wife in bed with her boss. Fueled by rage, I grabbed a gun and took control of the situation. After tying them up in the barn, I made off with my wife's lover's money, car, and boat. Then I orchestrated my own disappearance and started a new life under a different identity. Wow, how have you managed to carry the weight of that burden for so long? I'll need some time to process my thoughts and emotions about all of this. Maybe it would be best if you left for now. I just need some time alone. I walked away, feeling a sense of relief from finally confessing. However, another part of me knew it was time to escape once more. Why did I reveal so much to her? What made me believe she could be trusted? 48 hours later, she appeared at my door. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she asked. "Sorry," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Come on in. Can I get you something to drink? Can I have a cup of coffee, please?" We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. "If we want to move forward, Seamus, you need to confront your problems." "I know, Neve. I just don't know where to begin in fixing the mess I've created." "I believe I have a solution. My uncle Brendan is a lawyer based in Liverpool, and I think you should reach out to him. You may not see how he can assist, but my uncle specializes in finding runaway children who flee to England. His network of investigators stretches across all of England. Perhaps he can locate your wife and gather information on where you stand with the police. It's worth a shot." "I guess so." "Excellent. He will arrive tomorrow." "Are you an angler?" "I have experience with it." "Okay. He enjoys fishing in the Shannon River. You should share your story with him. He may be able to offer some insight or assistance. By the way, do you happen to have €100 on you?" "Yes?" "Give it here." He held out his hand, and I carefully counted out the money. "As your hired lawyer, everything we discuss is protected by confidentiality. So go ahead and give me all the details, even the ones you left out before." And I began to share everything with him, including my recent trip to Spain. "Oh boy, you've gotten yourself into a mess." "All right. I'll have to go back and do some digging. It won't be cheap, but it will be necessary." Niam and I were still planning on going out for our usual dinner and dancing, but we had silently decided to take things slow until we heard back from Uncle Bin Dan. 6 weeks had passed since our conversation, and he finally returned to Galway and stopped by the medical office. "Can you take some time off, Seamus?" he asked me. I replied with a simple yes, before arranging for Declan to cover my shifts with Ivan, the receptionist. "Would you like to go up to the farm?" "Sure, let's do it." We brought our mugs of coffee with us into the cozy sitting room, and Declan handed me the report. It was a detailed record of everything that had happened to my wife after I left, and this is the only existing copy. "Please read the report carefully and call me tomorrow evening. I'll be spending the day fishing with Niam, but I'll be available to talk in the evening." After he finished his coffee, we shook hands and he departed. I eagerly held onto the report, eager to find out its contents. In the past, I called the police from an unknown phone. When they arrived, they found Janet and Julian writhing in pain. An ambulance was called, and they were both treated. Neither Janet nor Julian Brott wanted to press charges. so the police couldn't lay any charges against anyone. Sending emails to the company had caused quite a stir. An American corporation was in talks with Mehdi to take over their business, and one of the email addresses I had sent photos to happened to belong to a member of the buyout team. As a result, the Americans began to hesitate about proceeding with the deal. European companies were not as strict about their employees' personal lives as those in the US. While there is not a clear history of lawsuits against companies for intimate misconduct by their employees, the company was still concerned about potential legal action. The European branch conducted an investigation and promptly fired those responsible. This decision angered Upward, who blamed Julian and Janet for his termination. As a result, Julian's wife Natalie kicked him out of their house. After having nowhere else to turn, he ended up moving in with Janet and me. While going through his belongings, Natalie discovered some illegal substances. She turned them over to the police, who then arrested and charged him. As a result of this discovery, the authorities searched my home and uncovered even more prohibited substances. Further investigations into the matter revealed that the Spanish police had also found prohibited substances aboard his boat. He insisted that he had the records to prove his innocence, claiming that they only used the boat for personal use and not for smuggling prohibited substances from the mainland. However, the amount of prohibited substances found was enough to charge them with prohibited substances dealing. The local journalist saw this connection as an opportunity to gain recognition and covered the story in more detail than national publications. Law enforcement investigated the European link and arrested Witters, van der Krausen, Visser, and Delmas. After investigations uncovered evidence prohibited substances trafficking connected to Eastern Europe, several people were charged and sentenced to 10, 15 years in prison. It was revealed that Urquhart, the main suspect, was even more malicious than previously thought. He had ordered the abduction of Janet and Julian, who were taken to an abandoned warehouse. Fortunately, the police had been monitoring a nearby court and were able to quickly call for backup to raid the premises. Although they couldn't save Julian from being severely beaten, they were able to rescue Janet with only a broken nose and cheekbone. Julian, Janet, and Upward faced a range of charges in court. Julian was convicted of prohibited substances offenses and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Upward received a harsher sentence of 20 years and had his assets confiscated by the Serious Organized Crime Agency's Asset Recovery Branch. Janet, on the other hand, only received a suspended sentence. She had attempted to have me declared legally deceased using the newspaper articles I had seen as evidence in order to sell our house and collect my life insurance. The case had been a long and drawn-out affair, with the loss adjusters constantly disputing the validity of the claim. In the end, the bank took possession of the property and she was left with nothing. Without any source of income, she had no choice but to take a job as a shelf stacker and cashier at Tesco. It was there that she met a wealthy widower who eventually began dating her. Despite all the negative publicity surrounding her, she managed to win him over, and he proposed. In order to hold on to him and his fortune, she saw it necessary to eliminate my presence from their lives. As a result, Janet had divorced me, citing abandonment as the reason. I was single once again. The following day, I gave her a call and we set up a lunch meeting. I arrived early and waited for her to arrive. When she did, her expression was a combination of excitement and nervousness. I handed her the report that your uncle gave me. I think it's important for you to read it before we make any decisions. Do you agree? As much as anyone can be sure of anything, yes. For us to have a future, I need you to know the truth. I've been living in secrecy for far too long, and I want to be able to walk in the light with you. No more hiding. I'll bring this burden home with me. I'll give you a call later on. I was on edge all afternoon, waiting for the phone to ring. It finally did at 7 o'clock. Seamus, my aunt's voice said, can you come over to the house? Uncle Brendan is here. We need to consider our next steps. In an instant, I was in the car. I sat outside on the patio, nervously playing with my coffee. Brendan began speaking. In my opinion, marriage is not an option for you at this time. My heart dropped to my stomach. It was at that moment when I truly understood the depth of my love for Neve and my desire to marry her, despite knowing we would have to wait another 18 months before she could legally divorce. This realization left me feeling utterly bewildered. I didn't think divorces were possible in Ireland. Have you been out of the loop, Seamus? Or do you prefer James? Divorce has actually been legal in Ireland for almost a decade now. Neve and her husband have been apart for 2.5 years, but they still have to wait another 1.5 years before they can marry again according to the law. It all made sense now. I turned to Neve and spoke. What do we do now? We have to wait for 18 months. I didn't want to rush into marriage, but I also hadn't officially proposed yet. She smiled and said, You will. Neve wasn't aware of the conversation Brendan and I had after she told me about her belief that I would propose to her. He wanted to make sure I wouldn't hurt his only niece, so I reassured him that I had changed and had no desire to put myself in that situation again. Although I may not have been imprisoned, I definitely didn't feel free. He granted me that freedom, and I will never give it up again. After 2 years, we got married. Despite the change in my marital status, everyone still knows me as Seamus. It's just simpler than trying to explain to all my new acquaintances and customers. Neve and I reside on the farm, but now I lease out the acreage. The opportunity to explore the world with my stunning partner is too valuable to be bound by possessions, and she doesn't want me leaving our bed at daybreak. And that's the end of the story. Thank you for your valuable time. Give me your generous likes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.